Jeszcze Stango Falacka Adami Jahodifkados Hayowat Muskogee Igana Ofan Lake Dues Tallahassee Wogugai Imidowados Mon Nogozolgi Ibuji always. Welcome everyone to the Natives and Tech Conference 2020. My name is Adam Khli Jalahi. I am the president of Natives in Tech, and Natives in Tech is a nonprofit organization of Native technologists that build tech for Native communities. I wanted to do some land acknowledgement. Just as I said in my opening, I am reside on the Muskogee Creek Nation Reservation. I'm a citizen of the Muskogee Creek Nation. My tribal town is Tallahassee Wagugai, and I am the son of Bear Clan. This is the second annual conference. If you missed the first one, you can find it on YouTube. And the focus for this year's conference is Native people building tech for Native communities. So once this conference ends, the videos will be available on YouTube for anyone to see. So a few announcements. First, we want to acknowledge our donors. And so our donors are Asquera, hopefully I'm saying that correctly, Hoverbear Consulting, as well as people like you. If you want to contribute to Natives in Tech, you can make a donation through our Open Collective. Next, I would like to go over the schedule for today. So right now I'm doing the intro. At 12:05, Danielle and Sean will be presenting on their topic. 12:45, we'll have Amelia. At 1:10, Stephen. 1:40, Holly. At 2 o'clock, Jeff. 2:45, Keone. And around 3:20, we will be closing out the conference. Another announcement I want to make is Natives in Tech has a partnership with Coding Dojo to offer 5 full ride scholarships to Native students. And so please get the word out, share on your social media, talk to friends, talk to, try to get the word out there as much as you can, because we do want to try and get students an education in software development, and we think that this would be a great opportunity for them to break out into the tech industry. And lastly, we talked about the donors, but just want to say a big motto for everyone's help in getting the conference to this point. As you see, we've had donors behind the scenes, we've had volunteers, and also this, conference wouldn't have happened without the speakers themselves. So, motto, thank you to all the speakers for and everyone's effort in helping this to come together. It's 12:04, so I think I'll get to the next slide. So the keynote speakers for today are Danielle Boyer and Sean Ray. Danielle is Ojibwe, Sean is Dene, and they're going to be talking about bringing technical education to your community. And it's 12:04, maybe we will start momentarily. Okay, 12:05. We'll get started. So I hope everyone enjoys.
Hi everyone, and welcome to our presentation here at the Natives in Tech Conference. We're so excited. This is actually our first year presenting. We're going to be talking about bringing technical education to your community. Whether you're an educator, a parent, or just a family member who wants to teach kids about everything to do with science, technology, engineering, art, and math, this is the presentation for you. We're also going to be talking about our individual journeys in STEAM and as engineering students. So we can't wait to share that with you all. So as I said, my name is Danielle Boyer and my pronouns are she, her, hers. My mother is Ojibwe and I'm from the Sault Ste. Marie Band. I'm a teen entrepreneur, author, inventor, activist, and educator, and I work to make STEAM more accessible, affordable, and diverse for children. I do this through robotics. I've actually been working in STEAM since I was 10 years old. I taught my first class at my homeschool group. It's very unoriginally, it's called Home, which is helping others master education. And I taught at age 10. I saw animal puppets at the store and I begged my mom to let me teach. And she was very hesitant at first. She was like, dude, you're 10. Why, what? And long story short, they ended up letting me teach. And I taught a semester-long animal science class. And ever since then, my eyes have been open to the world of accessibility and education and what resources are available to kids and not and why. And it has driven me to become a better educator, engineering student, etc. I'm currently pursuing both electrical engineering and mechanical engineering with a minor in physics. And it has been a really difficult journey, but one that I wouldn't trade for the world. It's been really rewarding and very cool. I want to pursue a career in biorobotics, which is the emulation of biological organisms, either mechanically or chemically. I'm not much of a chemical engineering person, so I'm interested in mechanical engineering, and that's what I end up wanting to pursue in the future. Ever since I started my work many years ago, I've gotten some notoriety and recognition for it, which has been really, really cool. Expanding my platform has allowed me to reach even more kids all around the world. I reach tens of thousands of kids with my resources and through my organization, which we're going to be talking a bit more about later. And it has just been really honoring. I've been named one of People's Girls Changing the World, a L'Oreal Women of Worth, etc. And it has just been really cool to have this journey and to be able to impact kids in such a great way.
Hey everyone, my name is Sean Ray. My pronouns are he, him, his, and I'm a citizen of the Navajo Nation. I'm a senior in electrical engineering at Oklahoma State University, and during my time here, I've been working to help increase just opportunities for Indigenous students. I've worked on projects with NASA. I'm currently doing research in biomechanics with artificial muscles, and working with my local ACES chapter to just help bring awareness to the STEAM community, to minorities and other BIPOC people everywhere. So one of the things that I mentioned was working with NASA. And so if you'll, the picture on the left is actually a research project that I worked with on a team of students from OSU. And we put together, designed, created a tool to help seal any breaches that may happen on the ISS. And so that was a really fun project, getting to work with everybody, working with NASA engineers. And then the picture on the right kind of goes over the research project that that I've been working on for the past couple of years, dealing with artificial muscles and how they relate to exoskeletons.
So we talk a lot about STEAM, but what is STEAM? STEAM stands for Science, Technology, Engineering, Art, and Math. And to us, it is a blend of important skills ranging from everything to designing to coding that kids should learn to thrive in their futures. A lot of you are in technology, and we believe that those skills are very important for kids to learn. And we're in engineering and technology as well.
As you can see here by these graphs, a lot of the demographics in STEAM are clear in showing just how underrepresented different minorities are, both by race and by gender. What we're working to do is to help bridge this gap and bring the diversity in STEAM area.
And we've also noticed that, as in many graphs, and with the recently CNN calling us something else, we can see that we're an other on this graph as well. And there's a huge disconnect between the children who want to pursue STEAM and different technical careers and the resources that they need to be able to do so. And so that's a huge part of our job, is helping make that happen. And this data is from Intel, and I have to thank their diversity officer, Rhonda, for helping provide this information. She is a huge advocate for Indigenous peoples in technology especially, and I met her through the American Indian Science and Engineering Society National Conference, and it has been such a blessing. So I really appreciate her help with this.
So some of the main issues that we at the STEAM Connection are trying to help resolve and really bring much more of an awareness to are, the main thing is the exposure that students have to STEAM subjects. And so a lot of times in their K through 12 education, there's not a lot of exposure to really any of these areas. And so that's the main thing for us that we're trying to do. And the other thing is just simply, students are told that, you know, STEAM isn't for them. It's a category that is, you know, for the general population that has been working it for years. And so if you don't fit in what the typical, you know, demographic looks like for that area of work, then, you know, you shouldn't do it. And then the last thing is that a lot of students don't realize how just diverse and involved STEAM is. And so the acronyms STEAM, science, technology, engineering, art, and math, each of those categories has such an entire array of different things that people can go into. And so a lot of times people or students think, you know, that's just like, you work on, you know, robots and stuff, and I don't want to do that. And that's absolutely not what it is. And so there's so much to be learned in all those different areas, and that's what we want to help teach students, is that it's not just one area in particular.
I've also known that number 2 has been really pervasive in my life, especially with being told that STEAM wasn't meant for me. I've been in environments where I've been like bullied and harassed just because of my interests in STEAM, and I don't want any other student to have to experience that. And whenever a student comes to me and tells me that this is happening, it absolutely breaks my heart, because I know what it feels like. And I feel like these root issues are what cause students to not want to pursue STEAM, and it's one of the reasons that I almost didn't pursue electrical and mechanical engineering. I felt like I couldn't do it because that's what people told me. And I think that it's just so important to address these root issues with the programs that we're doing, and we're going to be talking about a bit more. And hopefully some suggestions that you all can take away to help address these root issues in your community and in your household.
So these are 3 of our main goals that have really just created and developed the STEAM Connection that we know today. And, you know, being role models in STEAM, increasing just the accessibility for students, particularly BIPOC students, and just giving the representation to them that they need in the STEAM community.
And I think that what's beautiful about these goals is that they can look like so many different things. For example, educational accessibility can involve everything from financial accessibility to access to resources for students with, say, disabilities or different learning challenges. And we work to focus on every single child at every area in their life, on what barriers are there and how can we best address them. One of the biggest issues that we found is actually access to Wi-Fi, especially in Navajo Nation. And a lot of kids don't have access to Wi-Fi and the internet. And we were thinking about how can we bring robotics and tech resources into all of these communities and households when this isn't a readily available resource. And we've actually found ways to overcome that, which was insane. being role models in STEAM is why we're doing things like this presentation today and why we're talking to you all, because a lot of you are probably older than us and role models to us as well. But I think that we can offer some things in our young perspectives on education and some of the accessibility gaps that hopefully you'll be able to address in your own communities, especially with your expertise. And as for increasing representation for BIPOC youth in education, that's something that's really driven me personally. I've written now 6 books because of this, to be able to provide representation for students who need it the most. And I think that's just a beautiful thing. All of the art that you see in this presentation, I actually drew myself. My mom is a traditional artist and does the most beautiful work ever, so I by no means consider myself to be an artist. But it is just so cool to be able to provide just a little bit of representation for students. And I have all of this art up on my walls in my classroom. So I started the STEAM Connection in January of 2019, and the STEAM Connection focuses on creating diverse, accessible, and affordable STEAM educational materials for young kids by students. And I started it to provide everything from free educational classes to free robotics to free books. And I started it in Oakland County, Michigan. I live in Troy, Michigan. And I wanted this resource to be readily available, and it is a nonprofit. And Sean is actually one of our newest team members. He's our newest board member, which is awesome. We have a very small team, and this is our small board of directors, but we are all students dedicated to increasing representation and access to opportunities for youth in STEAM. And it's just really cool to be able to do this and to be able to reach the tens of thousands of students that we do through our resources. And it's just a huge, huge blessing. Do you want to say anything, Sean?
I mean, it's great to be on the team. I'm really looking forward to what we're going to do. And just, yeah, we've got a lot to do, and I'm looking forward to it.
Me too.
So the main thing about us on the STEAM Connection team is that we are educators, and so we are going into mainly the K through 12 area and focusing on more middle school age children and helping educate them in the STEAM area. And so that's what we're really trying to drive through and accomplish right now, the areas that we're going into. And so like Danielle said, we're based in Oakland County, Michigan, but given kind of the circumstances that everybody's in right now, we've actually just kind of become a virtually based organization. And so with mentoring and helping K through 12 students, we go into all kinds of different areas like robotics and classes and hosting events, and just really helping emphasize the different areas of STEAM, particularly engineering, because that is, that's what we're studying. And so that's one of the main things that we focus on, but we want to make sure that we incorporate every element of STEAM and really just teach it as a holistic area instead of just one particular area.
So a few of the initiatives that we've started during the pandemic, we do a lot of different projects. Like for example, in January of this year, we taught 20 classes within that month span. And I just wanted to talk about some of our recent initiatives and what we've been doing to bring STEAM to children. One of my favorite projects is the COVID-19 Robotics Initiative. And this slide is actually older. We've brought over 150 robots to Black and Indigenous youth through a new virtual distribution program that I started, where we actually are shipping out robots individually to children so we're not in person, and we've been teaching everything over the computer, which is insane. I don't know if you all have any experience in wiring robots, but teaching robotics over a computer is just so hard, especially when the robots end up looking a lot like this, kind of like a little bomb. And teaching that over the computer is just a huge struggle, but overcoming these challenges has been so rewarding because the kids have been able to access resources that they may not be able to otherwise.
And I think that's one thing in particular that we've benefited off of from the pandemic, is that we're actually able to reach a lot of students that we wouldn't before, because we can tune in virtually and we don't have to organize a whole event, make sure people are free. you just log on the computer and we can help people out that way.
Yeah, and actually, Sean, you were one of the main speakers at my different classes that I've taught for this initiative, which is just so amazing. Especially so many of the students who attended are both Black and Indigenous, and so are you. And so acting as that role model and acting as someone who is an engineering student and is about to graduate is just awesome for the students to be able to see that. And I think that's so inspiring. Moving right on, we have the Make a Robot platform. So in the beginning of 2019, I invented a robot named Every Kid Gets a Robot, the one I just showed you with all the wires. It costs less than $20 and goes to kids for free. It's actually made out of biodegradable resources. I've sent out over 4,500 robots just from my distribution point in Troy, Michigan. And it is so, so cool. I've been able to reach so many kids, especially kids in tribal communities. And it is just a great resource. We found a way to make it so that the robots run without any Wi-Fi. It's just been such a blessing to be a part of. I designed the robots in SolidWorks, which is a 3D modeling software. And it's just so, so cool. I love the work that SolidWorks is doing in the community. And I also started a Make a Robot platform so that I didn't have to ship any parts out. People could start making their robots from their house. And it has just blown up, and the robots have gone to more places than I have, and I think that's just so cool. Another project that we have been working on, I worked on with my mentor. His name is Dr. Joshua Ellison Burbank, and he's from the Navajo Nation, and this is him and his kids. They are adorable. The little girl is Kat, and the little boy is Caleb. And we raised over $40,000 to bring Navajo children's books to children of the Navajo Nation, because a lot of the kids do not have access to Wi-Fi, and there's a huge educational accessibility gap. And books are a great way to do it. And what better way than supporting Navajo authors who are just so talented and write these beautiful, beautiful books. And so that has been a really cool project to be a part of. And I'm so blessed to have my mentor he's a speech language pathologist who's just so accomplished in the world of creating resources for children. And he has a great Instagram account at NDNSLP, which I totally suggest looking into. He also roped me into a fellowship at the University of Vermont for leadership in neurodevelopmental disabilities. And at first I was really hesitant, but it has provided such an amazing resource for me to be able to help the kids. And it's just been a really big blessing. I also started a podcast with my mentee, Vinia. She's 13 now, and it's called Hands-On Techie Talks. It's a hands-on resource that kids can access during the pandemic and follow along with as they are listening. We actually had Sean on recently on one of our episodes where we talked about robot muscles, climate change, and Native American Heritage Month. And honestly, it was my favorite episode. It was so much fun to record. And that was really cool. I suggest if your kids are interested in environmental action, especially, to check out this podcast. And we're actually on Spotify and Apple Podcasts and all that type of stuff, which is just so, so cool.
Go check it out. It's awesome.
Yeah. And our newest project is called 20. It's something that I released very recently. And it's a robot that I'm releasing up until Christmas, where kids can access resources to download and make their own cardboard or 3D printed robot. And that is a resource that is available to everyone listening to this presentation right now. So go check it out at my website at www.steamconnection.org.
So one of the main things that we, not only as educators, are helping other students with, but we're also helping other educators. And what we really want to help give people the resources for is just how they can get involved in STEAM and how they can really make an impact in their communities in building up all the different BIPOC students that are very, very interested in this subject. And so, the main thing is just get out there, go do it. It seems like a simple thing, but it really is. It's just a matter of, if you're short on ideas, Google STEAM or STEM ideas to help teach students, and you will find a ton of resources. And the main thing is just reaching out and knowing that you don't have to set up a huge, event or a huge like gathering or whatever. Start with the people that you know. Who do you know in your own community right now that you can help out and that you can, help encourage to share different STEAM ideas with. And so, and one of the things that I've learned definitely is that no matter what your age is, there is something in STEAM that can be taught to you. And so there's a lesson for every age that somebody can learn if they want to get into STEAM and if they're really interested in it. And even if they're not, as much interested in it, just showing them things that they're already interested in, being like, this is how it connects to STEAM. That's something that is just really helpful to really encouraging the growth of that community.
Oh, I totally agree. STEAM has the power to impact communities in so many different ways, and it's awesome to be able to share these resources, so hopefully you can make some of the impact that you want to make in your community, and in an affordable way too, which is the best. So we're going to talk about some affordable teaching tools, and I'm really excited to share these with you because I know that is a huge, often challenge that people face when they're trying to introduce their kids, local community to different resources because things just cost so much money. So we're here to offer some ideas that hopefully you can utilize. And I've tested all these things out myself, so I know they work. The first thing is CAD. And that stands for Computer Aided Design. And some of you may be in CAD, some of you may not be, but I still think it's a valuable thing to teach kids. So why CAD? CAD gives students a way to focus on working through a design process to understand what must be done to solve a problem. It's a valuable math and design skills are taught, which is amazing. I think that's really important, especially with young kids. It teaches faster project completion and kind of understanding everything from the ground up. It teaches planning skills and helps prevent developmental delays in young children. And everything combined, CAD is just such a great way to teach kids, and you can even later 3D print your results or build what you're CADing, which I think is just so cool.
So another resource that is really helpful is to getting to both elementary and middle school students is SolidWorks, and they actually have an app for kids. And so there's a free beta version and there's a free educator version. And the really great thing about this is that it just really helps from a platform that is helpful for kids to learn. And so it's really useful in them learning about, computer aided design and how they can model things and how they create things on the computer, which can in turn, in the future, when they encounter these things in classes or projects or anything of that sort, they'll already kind of have an idea of like, oh yeah, like I remember that from the SolidWorks app. So
I totally agree. It is such a great resource. I use it all the time in my classroom. I'm going to go over some lesson plan examples that I've utilized with the SolidWorks app for kids. One of them being talking about the design process. So I believe that the design process, especially for kids, goes through empathize, define, ideate, prototype, test, and then share. Starting out with empathize, and this is an example I use about how it's hard not to silence your alarm in the morning. Like you just slap your phone off and you continue sleeping, right? And I was like, what can we actually do to help solve this problem? So define what I wanted the kids to do. Ooh, my hair is wild. So define what I wanted the kids to do. So in this case, I had the kids make a phone case and a device to help people wake up on time. And then ideate. I had them come up with ideas to help solve the problem, and then they CAD'd it in the SolidWorks app for kids. Then they prototyped the idea with a bunch of weird crafts I got from the dollar store and different materials. And then we tested to see if the phone case worked. I actually tested each phone case, each for a week in the morning. And one kid came up with the idea, him and his brother, to put zip ties and cut them at an angle. So they're super spiky. And I have to say that was very evil, but very effective. And it helped teach them a design process as we were going. And then share, see what the other kids think of your design, see what your parents think of your design. And I ended up sharing everything on my blog and let the kids come up with a bit of their write-up. So that was really cool and a great opportunity and something simple that you can easily teach to whether it be one kid or a classroom. Another thing that I've done in the SolidWorks app for kids is have the kids design a robot. So I would have the kids design what they thought a robot should look like or does look like. And it resulted in some really wacky robots, from a bunny robot to just different cool creations. And I ended up 3D printing them. And this is showcased at the Detroit Maker Faire in 2019. This is another example of having the kids design what they thought a robot should look like or does look like. One kid actually designed a drone and then CAD'd it, and then I 3D printed it. It was just a really great project to get them kind of introduced to CAD and introduced to what things look like or should look like, and kind of breaking their mental boundaries of what a robot is or what a robot should be. Another cool project is to look up different local competitions or like virtual ones. For example, the Rockwell You Make It Challenge was such a great opportunity for the kids to learn more about STEAM and to learn more about the design process. On the left, we have one of our students who came up with a couch bed. And so like you fold it down and it's a couch, and you fold it back up, and it's just a really cool option. And his CAD looks really cool. And then on the right, we have a divider that you can shut into your car window so that your pet can stay safe inside of the car and still have air vents, but not escape. And I thought that was really creative. Irene wanted to add like a fan and different things like that. I think the winner of this project, of the You Make It Challenge, I think it was an anti-bully backpack, which the student who won ended up creating, and it was just really cool. I suggest looking up his stuff, and it's just awesome.
So some of the things that I've worked on in projects in the past are very focused on CAD and SolidWorks. And so one of the things that we try to help students learn in the STEAM Connection in particular is specific teams that are focused on utilizing SolidWorks or CAD for their design projects. And so SolidWorks Education Edition is one that is heavily used in FIRST Robotics because it's a free one, and it has so many different tools that really help students learn about 3D modeling and how they can incorporate that into their engineering designs. And so in not only with the free software, but they can also sponsor a lot of the different teams that are working out there. And so with SolidWorks in particular, there is a certification process that for both students and educators, just to show of the proficiency and the skill that you have in that area. And I can definitely say that with a lot of the projects that I've been working on, and a lot of the things that I've done in my 4 years of university, is that SolidWorks is definitely one of those things that is like transferable to so many different areas in STEAM. And so it's such a helpful tool that we really try to encourage students to learn and to help them learn the different skills in utilizing it.
Oh, I totally agree. It is such a great resource, and I use my SolidWorks license every single day. I highly recommend looking into the resources and seeing if you can get a license for your classroom or for your student. 3D printing can be really expensive, but I think that is a great thing to teach kids. If you have a rather medium budget, there are affordable 3D printers around like $200 that you can purchase. They're very small and perfect for a classroom. You can also get a 3D pen for kids, which is like $30 for a medium range 3D pen, or you can get even more inexpensive versions on Amazon, which is awesome. But something that I recommend that is free if you have a printer is printing directly from the app for kids in a cube style. So you can actually fold up the prints into a cube, and so it is a 3D model, but you don't need to have access to a 3D printer or anything like that for kids to be able to see what their design looks like. And I just think that is the coolest feature, and I totally recommend checking it out. You can also download your stuff as a print by number, which is just so cool. Also regarding Every Kid Gets a Robot, which I talked a little bit about, that is an affordable resource. I mean, it costs $18.95 to create, and I sent to kids for free. So if you feel like this suits your classroom, please shoot us an email. We'll have our email at the end of the presentation. We want to bring these resources, especially to Indigenous youth. So if you're helping make that happen, we want to support you. A few lesson examples with Every Kid Gets a Robot is in the SolidWorks app for kids, I actually had students design Ecker wheels, and this is what 3D prints of them look like. That's amazing. Fourth graders design these, 4th and 5th grade students, that doesn't feel real at all. It's just so cool to me. Another project I highly recommend is called Bristlebots, and I didn't come up with this, but I still think it's a really good resource. And it's make your own toothbrush head robot, and it's perfect for young children. All you need is like a vibrating motor, a button cell battery, toothbrush head, googly eyes, pipe cleaner, double-sided tape. And that is all you need to be able to make this really cool creation. And the robots like vibrate around and kids have a lot of fun. They're cheaper than the Huxbugs too.
And so more stuff that's really extremely affordable to just help learn about engineering in particular are different Adafruit or Arduino or Raspberry Pi, or just different little kits that they're so cheap and kids can learn so much out of it.
For sure.
And I mean, honestly, I use some of them for my class projects. So because they're so cheap and they get the job done. And so those are things that are definitely helpful for helping teach and educate STEAM ideas.
And I use the Adafruit Circuit Playground Express all the time. It may seem a bit expensive, but you don't need to solder anything. All you need are alligator clips, and you can make everything from like circuit projects with copper tape, like conductive projects, to hooking it up to a servo motor to make animatronic. I really recommend this, and it is a really great resource. So something I recommend that if you're maybe just getting started, or even if you're further along in your STEAM education journey, if that is what you're up to, community and corporate support is really important if you want to continue to grow or if you need resources. People can't support you if they don't see what you do or who you are. And I think social media can play a huge role in helping make that happen, whether it be a podcast, Instagram account, Twitter account. I think that just getting your stuff out there, if you want corporate or community support, is a great way of making that happen. Also, if you create content or you show a project that you're working on actively and you update people on it, that's a great way to get people kind of engaged with what you're doing and interested in the work that you're doing. Also, obviously, the pandemic is a bit rough with going to well-attended events and offering hands-on experiences, but there's a lot of opportunities virtually to be able to make this happen with different Zoom even, like hands-on hallways. Obviously, it's not hands-on, but there's still a lot of resources that can be utilized. And I really recommend utilizing it because a lot of parents will put their kids in front of a laptop and have them just go on and do different online things. And you may expose a kid to some really cool resources. And I think that's really awesome. Also engage with different STEAM/STEM influencers and do ask for help. Like follow ACES HQ on Instagram. Follow SACNIS on Instagram. Engage with them. Ask them if you can help in any way. I just think that's really, really cool.
So one thing that is really helpful, and I think it has become even more apparent during the pandemic, is just being able to create content. And so content on a website or making an Instagram or a TikTok or anything like that, or a YouTube channel. And any of these platforms are just really well at helping share information that to students about STEAM. And even if you're not completely like I'm not an expert in this area, find something that you're interested in that you as an educator know about in STEAM and help bridge that gap of information and letting people know. And one thing I've definitely learned over working with kids is that if you treat this as like the most interesting thing in the world, they will too. And so just going into it and like, yes, this is so cool. Look at what you can do with this information. Look how this works and this works. Then they'll just be like, oh my gosh, yeah, that is awesome. And so really just kind of throwing yourself into it and really just diving in and making content that will help kids learn more about STEAM and different areas that they want to be interested in.
I totally agree. So that's the conclusion of our presentation. If you want to keep in touch or learn more about the work that we're doing, you can go to our website or you can email us. You can also follow me on Instagram and Twitter. I post the most about what the Student Connection is up to on a day-to-day basis. And I'm just really excited for you all to reach out if you're interested in learning more about Everything Gets a Robot or about our children's books or our classes, or a way if you want to collaborate in the future. And thank you so much for attending our presentation.
Thank you, Danielle and Sean, for your presentation on robotics there. Very, very interesting and cool stuff that you're doing. Next, we're going to have Amelia Winger Bearskin talk about creative technology, but we're going to take a short little break and we'll be back at 12:45 Central Daylight Time. So 12:45, see you all back here. Hishe Estemolga. Hi, everyone. We are back. Like I said, the next presenter is going to be Amelia Winger Bearskin talking about creative technology.
My name is Amelia Winger Bearskin. Thank you so much for having me speak today. I would like to share with you some of my work. I am Seneca Cayuga Nation of Oklahoma, Deer Clan. That means I'm Indigenous on my mother's side. And we are part of the Iroquois, or as we like to call ourselves, the Haudenosaunee, which are the Six Nation people of the Longhouse. We're a Confederate democracy. I would love to share with you a little bit about my practice, both with a term that I've coined called antecedent technology and decentralized storytelling. Decentralized storytelling really comes from the way in which I grew up learning about my own oral history of my culture. My mom is a traditional storyteller for our tribe, which means that she gathered and collected the stories from the elders within our culture and shared them through performance at universities, festivals, museums, and also became someone who was a scholar and shared stories with other Indigenous people all around the world. When I was growing up, I would perform with her with flutes or drums or other type of our traditional instruments because our storytelling is actually multifaceted. It's why I call it decentralized, not just because it is decentralized within a multitude of different types of media, like visual media that might take the form of tattoos, or these same images may be on our pottery or our beading or on instruments in ceremony or objects within ceremonial traditions. It also, our storytelling is embedded in the landscape. It's connected to nature and to our animals. It's decentralized as a strategy to make it so that the wisdom that we have, the dependencies that are part of this architectural code of our community, to build a lasting peace and democracy, you need to abstract things in a way that you can communicate to future generations. We have a concept where anything that I'm doing now is the result of the 7 generations before me, and anything that I do will have a lasting impact on the 7 generations in front of me. But that also means that the information that I learn, something that I may add to this chain, needs to be clear, it needs to be abstracted, and it needs to also contain the multitudes of wisdom that I have learned without corrupting this information, right? So I think of it very much, since I am a technologist, I am a Mozilla fellow embedded at MIT's co-creation studio with Kat Sizak. I'm also a developer evangelist for the startup Contentful. And my work as a technologist has helped me also understand the cultural value and contributions Indigenous people have, and be able to communicate it with other technologists as well. If you're going to take whatever you made in code this week, maybe let's say, and communicate that to someone 7 generations in the future, what would you need to include in that information? You might need to say what the thing you're doing is for, what its dependencies are. It might need something like a computer in order to run, and you'd have to explain what a computer is to those people who the technology may be so incredibly different in the future. But really, you would need to explain to them why these things mattered and how they're important and what types of values you hoped to engage with in order to make the world a better place. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about the projects that I've been doing in virtual reality with software development and co-creation, and also the podcast that I created called Welcome.Codes, where I interview Indigenous technologists about all the really amazing things they're doing with their own communities. So thank you very much for having me today.
There is that really crazy sound effect when the giant's leg gets shaved. That's this really strange sponge that I bought. That's the worst sponge ever. Like, it's so bad at scrubbing dishes. And we sat there and we were listening to it and we were like, this is the sound of shaving a giant's leg. This is perfect. I started out kind of my creative career as a writer, and I was really interested in kind of experimental writing that leveraged different aspects of new technologies. So I got to this point where I was like, it's really fun to think about technology and how it's impacting us, but I would really rather be working directly with the technologies. I went to a grad program called ITP, and I learned how to code. In my last year of grad school, VR suddenly came onto the scene as like something that was going to be accessible for us to use.
You know, Sarah was the first person I had met as an artist who was just working in VR in a more playful way. We just started brainstorming and thinking of moments when you virtually give someone a piece of your life, like in daily life. If I'm talking to Sarah and I'm trying to explain to her how I felt that morning or what I was thinking about the future, very frequently we prototype those kinds of experiences with sayings or with metaphors. So I can say, like, I walked into that room and my stomach just dropped, or it was so like loud that I felt like my ears were bleeding.
Your Hands or Feet is a VR experience. It's an interactive exploration of new metaphors. The experience starts off where you're in kind of this surreal looking kitchen and you have in front of you a half dozen carton of eggs, and inside of each egg is contained an experience that has some kind of psychologically complex action to it that we hope acts as something that you think back on and you're like, wow, this is such a strange feeling. It kind of reminds me of, for instance, like that time that I felt like my hands were feet.
I don't know. I feel like my mind is a confusing machine.
What we're really doing here is we're creating these metaphors that like maybe don't exist but might apply in a situation as like the perfect way to describe this thing.
In the beginning, I started with a basic treatment, so I created a lot of 3D assets to just sort of mock up this world, sort of the look and feel. And we came up with this idea of having it be like a half dozen experiences from, you know, a half egg carton and how we would move from each space.
Landing on the visuals for any project is an interesting process. You know, you have to make something that feels true to something that you like, but it also has to be something true to what the other person likes.
Sarah said she had this amazing friend, Neve Bavarsky, in LA, who was an illustrator. We reached out to Neve and, you know, showed him all of the reference imagery, showed him our very tight color palette of what we were trying to go for. And we were like, can you do the Neve version of Your Hands or Feet universe?
And then from there, we were like, how are we going to put this thing together? Because translating from 2D into 3D seems easy, but to keep the same visual style is not always so straightforward. It made a lot of sense, like, for us to approach it with a style that's inviting and not like depressing or scary, but just a little bit scary maybe.
It's really helpful to like take those two concepts and then give it to one person that can execute that so that it stays really consistent.
So we were like, let's try this tool, Medium, which is a 3D VR sculpting tool. And so we felt like, oh, this is perfect that we found this way to find like a slice of what we were interested in, a way that we can produce it in a really organic and fun way. And that's kind of how we landed on the visual style that we're at right now.
A lot of our music is going to be generative. So generative music is when you're really designing those whys, therefores, and ifs.
You know, normally you listen to a song and it's got the beginning and the middle of the end and there's like nothing you can do about it. But in an interactive song, there's ways that you can alter parts of it so that way you're sort of participating with the music. Every object that you pick up is like contains an audio track. Depending on which objects you interact with, you're really flushing out what the soundscape of that environment is.
Me and Sarah are doing all this work to create a really fun playground. We might have kind of serious concepts about the emotional resonance behind each of the interactions, which we have very long and engaged conversations about, like even the physicality of grabbing that object, to that action has to be connected. So we want each of the interactions to also be analogous to a place and time that you might have had that feeling.
When I look at it from an outside perspective, I'm like, a lot of these things have to do with frustration, but a lot of them also have to do with joy and feeling joy while doing something frustrating.
And so I want to give people a moment where they can interact with that quality of VR, where they can say, this is an extension of my brain and my experience within the world. This isn't the real world, this is the computational amalgamation of human understanding in this world, and I want to give people an opportunity to interact with that and interface with that.
When we explain it to people, they just get it and they're excited about it, even though it's like, oh, it's like an experience where your hands are feet, because don't you ever just feel like a weird feeling and you don't know how to describe it, and it's like something you've never felt before? Well, isn't VR the perfect way to kind of explore that? And people are like, oh yeah, that makes perfect sense. And I'm like, really?
Our Indigenous background.
So that's been pretty surprising also.
And we wanted to go out on this video and go to our reservation to the Red Star Range and to film the sites where a lot of these monsters were said to have been seen. And throughout the process, we ended up really discovering the meaning of what a monster is in our culture, which actually the word for the specific type of monster we were looking at in her tribe is also known as the little people, or keepers of the land. And we started thinking about that relationship of like, who is the monster and who is a monster because they're protecting the land. And we asked people at the end of this installation, would you be a monster with us? And the work that I've been doing this year is within a research framework called antecedent technology. Right now, I'm working on a project called wampum.codes. It's a project with Mozilla Foundation, a fellowship with embedded at MIT's co-creation studio with Kat Sizek. And I've been working on the history of wampum and how that connects to software development and ethics and ethical dependencies in software development. And I'd like to read you a little statement that I wrote about that. If history was written by the victors, then the future will be written by the vectors. Artificial intelligence will radically change our world, our lives, our planet, and it remains to be seen if it will be a positive or a negative. If it's said that those who fail to study history are doomed to repeat it, I would add that those who ignore data have underfitted models. When Thomas Jefferson and Benjamin Franklin were looking for a new model to serve as a basis for the United States government, they were very impressed by the Iroquois Confederacy. We call ourselves the Haudenosaunee, people of the Longhouse. We're made up of the Seneca, Cayuga, Oneida, Onondaga, Mohawk, and Tuscarora. Thomas Jefferson spent over a year with us in upstate New York in one of our largest cities. When Jefferson and Franklin and the other founding fathers drafted the U.S. Constitution, they cherry-picked the best parts that were most beneficial to their own political purposes, the bits that seemed to align the best with their Enlightenment-era ideology, representation, voting, checks and balances, etc. But they left out the social and cultural networks that sustained these practices in the actual Iroquois Confederacy. Well, what did they leave out? In the Iroquois Constitution, women, clan mothers from each tribe were the only ones who could vote for the representative, who was always a man, a chief. Actually, the word for clan mother and chief is the same word. There was a balance of power. Only men could serve and only women could vote. Their economy was driven through complex agricultural arrangements. Everyone in the community participated in planting and harvesting. It was not an economy of slavery-dependent plantation agriculture. This is an example of colonial mindset. I see it, I like it, I want it, I'll take it. I take it, and I take what will benefit my own paradigm, but I'm unconcerned with the effect it will have being taken out of context, and the effect it'll have on the people I take it from. This is like trying to run a program without checking its dependencies. What if it turns out that the Confederate democracy or lasting peace and prosperity is dependent upon a balance of power along gender lines, or upon a different economic model than the one practiced by European settlers in North America? Or what if it imagines a system of agriculture where the environment is protected and maintains sustainable practices? We all have colonial mindset, just because our culture has colonial mindset. But here's the thing, we're not colonial subjects, and we don't have to live under a colonial empire anymore. In data science, we talk about models suffering from either overfitting or underfitting. Overfitting is when a model exhibits a low degree of bias, but a high degree of variance. In other words, it accepts a lot of differences within the data, but it doesn't have very much predictive power. Underfitting is the inverse of this. High bias, low variance. This is what happens when you make a generalization without enough data, or when the data is not diverse enough to represent the real world. The big problem with colonial mindset is one of underfitting, extracting idea without the context that made that idea work in the first place. I'm here to say, don't colonize our future. Our plans for the future need to include more data from diverse cultures and societies, and not only those ideas that flatter what we already think. For instance, let's say you want to lay the groundwork for a society run on the blockchain. What does that look like? How does that work? What are the consequences? If we don't have significant data, we might just have to wing it. But we actually have thousands of years of data about decentralized economies. The use of wampum among the Iroquois functioned as a decentralized, distributed ledger of contracts, and it helped us govern our society for centuries. Wampum is an example of what I've termed antecedent technology, and there are many more cases like this. In South America, the Inca had a Turing-complete system of knot tying called quipu, which predated modern computing by hundreds of years. When we want to use powerful new technologies such as AI or blockchain, and we want as much data as we can to help us imagine positive change in the world, we do not need to throw out thousands of years of data that can fuel the next giant leaps our communities will make with technology. I want people to know that Indigenous people had technologies that have solved complex issues. I want us to use their data to help us dream our future, and I want us to believe that just because we have had 500 years of slavery, worker exploitation, poverty, and gender imbalance, we have had thousands of years of peace, prosperity, and equality right here in the country where I'm standing right now. There's a ton of Indigenous people working in AI and VR and cutting edge technologies. The internet has kind of a low barrier for entry, but also it's really where a lot of culture is happening right now with this prize. So I started just talking to my friends about the cool stuff they're making and also the cool stuff they're not making, because we're sheltering in place and having a lot of time to think about our process and our heritage and our cultures. And I'll let you guys hear a little bit of that.
Hello, I'm Amelia Winger-Bearskin, the host of Wampum.Codes. We are brought to you with generous support from the Mozilla Foundation and the Co-Creation Studio at MIT. I interview Native and Indigenous artists, activists, technologists, entrepreneurs, inventors, and all-around cool people. And I'll let our first guest of our very first podcast introduce herself.
Great, yeah. Well, my name is Asha Veeraswamy. I am an Indigenous storyteller, creative director, and digital media producer that really focuses on AR, VR, and XR technologies and how we transition to those in the 21st century.
Skenoswaguego, Ondawayesta Igaso, Agatsenoni, Nanto Igase. My name is Erica Tremblay, or Ondawayesta is my Cayuga name. And I'm super happy to be here and talk with you today.
Wampum.Codes, the podcast, is the first iteration of a project that I'm outlining to develop a model of ethical software dependencies, an attempt to inscribe community values and developer accountability into code. The way it works is as follows. An example is in my package.json, I have Wampum.Codes dependency, which makes it clear that this project I have created is free to use and that people can only use it and modify it in any way they want. Besides closed sourcing, open sourcing already covers this use case. However, I have also encoded my own values.
wampum.code's package.json dependency may look like this. And as you can see, it's formatted as a normal JSON file. I've borrowed a few terms from the domain of software development and repurposed them to help explain how an ethical dependency might be structured and what kinds of information it may contain. Most recently, I've been a part of the Four Freedoms Project, which includes the wide awakes that you may have read about in the New York Times or in The Guardian. They've launched a billboard campaign across the United States in all 50 states, including Alaska and Guam, Puerto Rico. And they have artists such as Ai Weiwei and Gorilla Girls and 50 other artists all together creating billboards to remind us of our civic joy and to remember Indigenous people's place and people of color within our great and wide and diverse democracy. During the global pandemic, an increasingly contentious political landscape, and the surge of energy from redirecting ourselves and rededicating ourselves to racial justice in America, I've witnessed my incredible peers balance fear, bravery, a commitment to family and to local and global communities of underrepresented people. I've seen them create art in response and build new systems of support, but among my friends, especially my female identifying friends, and especially those of us who are mothers, many of us are being asked to do the undoable daily. I wanted a message to remind the world that though through change making, we can't let ourselves become kindling. I don't want us to burn out. All the crises in the world today are asking us to run more and more current through the little filaments in our minds and souls. And when those go out, does it leave the world a brighter place? Of course it doesn't. The social, economic, physical, political, intellectual demands of a movement must bring with it the great care for and value of each human being who is a part of it. It was a really long tongue. He's just a puppy. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. I would love to talk to you and meet you sometime in person. Maybe sometime at a dog park with my puppy Cowboy. But I hope you all are doing well and are safe and happy. So much love. Bye.
Thank you, Amelia, for your presentation on virtual reality. Very interesting things going on in that space. We're going to take a short break. We're going to get started at 1:10, and that will be with Stephen Emery using ERA face meshing to raise awareness of missing and murdered Indigenous women. So just a short little 2-minute break, and we'll be right back. And we are back. Like I said, we're going to get started with Stephen Emery's presentation. He is of the Chickahominy Eastern Division. His talk, Using AR Face Meshing to Raise Awareness of Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women.
Hello, welcome to my talk about missing murdered Indigenous women, otherwise known as #MMIW, and how that relates to an augmented reality face meshing app that I'm building with a team of others. First off, my name is Stephen Emery. I am from the Chickahominy Eastern Tribe, and that goes along with my name, Mexiquana, that's in parentheses to the right. You'll see that on all of my deaf handles and such, so I just wanted to bring it up. It's a name my father gave me. It means moving water, and it's an Algonquin name that we pull from Chickahominy Eastern, which my dad is part of the tribe as well. I'm an Android and iOS developer. I'm focused on augmented reality for mobile devices. I'm also a father of two. Both my sons are members of Chickahominy Eastern as well. And I have a wonderful wife who, without her help, this project wouldn't have gotten started, and neither would this presentation. First off, what should you know about MMIW? Some of you may already know and some of you may not. So I just want to start out with some statistics. I'm just going to read through these. So on some reservations, Native women are murdered at a rate 10 times the national average. Between 2005 and 2009, U.S. Attorney Generals declined to prosecute 67% of Native community matters involving sexual abuse. 84% of Native women have experienced violence in their lifetime. 96% of sexual violence against Native women is perpetrated by non-natives. 5,712. That is the number of known incidents of missing and murdered Native American and Alaska Native women in 2016. Only 116 cases were logged in the DOJ database. And just for reference, 5,712 is a number higher than the casualty rate of the entire decade of which the Iraq War took. So how does MMIW and AR face meshing come together? Well, as I was learning about MMIW and reading the statistics, I came across these portraits of Asia, Michelle, and Nick. That's from top to bottom. Amazing activists who are working to bring awareness to MMIW. And after seeing the red hand and the black hand on their faces, it felt like this would lend itself to AR. And so what I wanted is an app that I could help make a difference in the world. I could use something that was in my development stack, but it was outside of work, and it would, make an incremental difference or maybe a large difference depending on how well it went. But the goal was to make a difference. And so after seeing these portraits and the red and black hands, the decision was born to build an Android and iOS app using AR Core. Just a side note, every one of the people in these portraits are amazing. They're very positive on the app and very helpful, and have been great when I reach out for information and other help. So let's take a look at the designs. I started off with designing this myself, and I won't trouble you with showing you those designs because they're not great. They were okay, but they're not great. So after seeing that they needed some work, I reached out to a good friend of mine who's also the director of design at my company. Her name's Teresa, and I said, this is the app I'm building. This is the cause I'm building it for. Do you have any ideas? And she got very excited about the prospect of working on this app. So she said that she could join the team and make the app look more professional, make it look more like an up-to-date app. And I was like, yes, thank you. And so hence these designs were born. The first two slides you'll see are missing murdered Indigenous women, and then it goes into MMIW. It's actually the same screen. There's an animation that morphs from missing murdered Indigenous women to MMIW, and Teresa added a couple of animations in here that just like really made the UI look great. And so once we go from that animation, we go into the statistics slides. We have Michelle on the first slide, and then Nick on the second slide, and Asia on the third slide. And I didn't get the okay from the fourth slide, so I won't mention her name. But we wanted to increase awareness. So as the user enters this app and goes through these slides, their awareness about MMIW builds. And before they even get to the point of taking an augmented picture with the red hand on their face, they will have learned something along the way. Just as a side note, all of these designs have been built in Figma. And so if you have any questions about Figma, feel free to ask. It's a great tool for all of this. And so that was an aside. So after the statistics, we'll go to the agreement page. The agreement page is basically to say, hey, be respectful when you use this app. We talked about adding each and every way that someone could be disrespectful as like a no list. But at the end of the day, that list is so long that it's not feasible. And so we just wanted to keep it short and simple to let them know what this app is for and that they can learn more. And if they agree, they can hit agree and they'll move on to the camera view. And here you'll see that we have the red hand. There's an option for a black hand that we're hoping to add in Android. It's already been added in iOS. There's the big capture button. And on the right side, you can flip the hand from right to left hand. After they hit the capture button, they'll be taken to the next screen where you see the MMIW banner at the top. And then at the bottom, you'll see a statistic in a view at the bottom. That'll be a swipeable view, and so the statistic can change, or it could be a quote like no more stolen sisters. And so it'll be changeable so it can be updated and be unique to the person, what they thought was the most impactful. And when they take this image, that banner and that statistic will go along with the image when they go to share, so that each image is as unique as possible and the information gets shared on social media. The last slide is the share slide, but I will switch to the next slide. The reason that's its own slide is I feel like this is the most important piece. We're working with an organization to gather information, hopefully. If people are willing to share with us, we hope to take their image, their email address, and their state. We want to keep the information as minimal as possible because we don't want any privacy concerns and we don't want anything leaking out from our database. So we're keeping as minimal as possible. The reason we want to use the email address and state is so that we can update users on community action events, legislative actions in their area, and any alerts for missing and murdered Indigenous women. As an aside, once someone goes missing, there's a matter of hours to find that person, not days. And usually police don't get involved until a day or so later. And so having an entire community of people in the state looking for someone just speeds up that time frame so that more people are looking within hours as opposed to days. But we also hope to share they share their image and we'll take the state with that information. We're going to build a website with a collage of photos so that people can see how much support this issue has for fixing it. And the state will be added so that if you click on, say, your state, you'll just see the portraits of the people in your state and you can see how many people are willing to come together for this issue. All right, so we're going to jump into the code. We're going to start with the face meshing side of the code. Before we even write lines of code, we need to create the texture that we want to be used inside the app. On the prototype 4, you'll see that this is just the base template image. And so we use that so that we can draw whatever we like on that face, and then it'll be used later to show on the face and on the device and the camera. So you start with the template. you draw what you like, and in this case we have a black hand. You'll notice that we try not to cover the nostrils or the eyes or the mouth. The reason is it creates a weird effect when, say, you open your mouth or things stretch. So keeping the slit for the mouth is very important. And then once we're done adding the piece that we want, we remove the background template and we leave the hand with the full size image, and we export that from Figma. We take that hand and then we're going to create a texture of it in the next slide. So there are a few requirements that need to be met when using ARCore. You need Android API 24 and above. That's 7.0 Nougat up to current. You need to request camera permissions in the Android manifest and programmatically as the user uses the app. And then once you got all that set up, we can go into the code. And in our case, we have the face AR fragment that extends the scene forms AR fragment. And we're going to override two functions here. One is get session configuration, and we're going to set augmented face mode to augmented face mode.mesh 3D. So that way we've turned on the ability to mesh the face. And then we're going to override get session features and set that session feature to front camera. And that's so you're not meshing outward, you're meshing your face that's looking at the phone. So it's an important piece to have it facing you so you can see what's going on. All of the code that I'm using today, I borrowed heavily from this blog. There's a source at the bottom, creativetech.blog. So if you'd like to see example code or learn more, you can check out that blog and see how they're using the code. And so now we're going to go into our activity, and this is where we create the texture that we're going to use on the face. So we're using the builder pattern. This is in Kotlin. So we have the texture, and we're doing .builder to get it set up, and then we're going to set the source. That r.drawable red hand, that's the same hand that we exported from Figma. In this case, it's red. There's also black, whichever you want to set here. And then we're going to build it, and then we set that texture to the face mesh texture that we're going to use when we set up ARCore. So once we have the texture, we need to pull the scene view from the AR fragment, and then we get the scene. And when we have the scene, we can add the on update listener. And what this does is it lets us know every frame that comes through. And what we do with that information is used for tracking and adding the texture to the face with each frame of the camera. So you can see we've got our scene view.session. We get the trackables, which is a collection of faces. And then for each face in that face collection, we're going to add the texture to the nodes that are on the face. And so it applies the face and it tracks as you go left and right. And if you have any questions, I'll have my contact info at the end so you can ask me more questions. I didn't want to go too deep, so I'm just going to leave it here for now. But essentially, ARCore makes it very simple with scene form to track a face and then add a texture to it. There's not a whole lot of code there. Next up, we're going to take a look at motion layout. We use motion layout for animations. Android Studio 4.0 has made it very easy to do this. And so I'm just going to talk through this process. When you create a layout for Android and you want to make an animation for it, you will declare the motion layout as the topmost feature of the layout. And so you have motion layout at the top. You give it an ID, you can give it a background if you like. One important piece is the app layout description near the top. That's where you set your scene. This is a file we're going to create, and it gets referenced by the motion layout. So once we've got that set up, we're going to add all of our views. This is just a few. You saw in the beginning with the missing murdered Indigenous women and how it morphs into MMIW. This is just the first few views. You got the hand that was at the very bottom, and the hashtag, and the M text with the rest of the missing text. So those are the views that we have for missing across the top. And we're going to use these IDs and the scene, which I'll show you next. One thing to note here is we don't set any constraints. So all of the constraints get set in the scene. None of them get set here. You can set the layout, width, and height, but we're also going to update those in the scene as well. But typically in Android, you'd set constraints here, and that's just a defining feature of motion layout that they don't get set here. You set them in the scene itself. When you create the scene, you're going to, at the very top, you're going to start with the transition. And so in the constraint set start, you set what starting animation you have, like the very beginning, and then you're going to set the end, which is animation end. And so you have point A to point B, and then you're going to set the duration it takes to get from point A to point B. And then you can choose among quite a few interpolators. The one we chose is ease in and out, which is just basically rather linear. It goes from A to B. In the slide, I have a video, and you can see that at least 5 other ones. There's quite a few more, but I'll show you these just so that you can see what they look like. So push play, and you can see that they're all interpolating at different rates, and they're all moving across in very distinct fashions. But the nice thing is that Android handles all of this, and you just give it a duration. So we've set the transition, and then we're going to create our scenes. And so on the left, we have animation start, and on the right, we have animation end. At the top, you can see, so we're going to start with the start. At the top, you can see our IDs of hand watermark, and the other 2 views, M text and missing text. Those are the same IDs that we had set in our motion layout previously. So it knows where to look. You also notice here that you have the constraint end and constraint starts. And so we're setting our constraints here so that we know where we want it to start, and we'll set similar or different constraints in the end. Another thing we'll notice here is motion visibility mode is set to ignore. This is not an important piece unless you're trying to set the visibility of each view programmatically. If you just want motion layout to handle it, you can delete this and ignore visibility mode. But if you ever want to change the visibility of the view programmatically outside of this file, you should set visibility mode set to ignore. A couple other features you'll see in the hand watermark, there's a custom attribute color filter. We use this to set the color of the hand to start, and in this case it's dark gray. And then we'll move it to red at the end. And then at the very bottom, you'll see custom attribute, the attribute name alpha, and we set it to fully opaque, and this is for the last half of missing. And so it starts out visible, and then we're going to move to alpha 0, which makes it fully transparent. And so you'll see these in the next slide. But so in start, you set where you want to start. And then in our animation end, you'll see that we have all the same views, watermark, M text, latter half of missing. You see visibility mode ignore as well. The constraints have changed because they're moving. And then custom attribute color filter the color's changed to red, and the alpha on the latter half of missing text is changed to 0, so it's going to disappear. This is really hard to explain, so I feel like a video is much more helpful. So I'll go to that next. So in Android Studio, they've added a motion layout editor. The beauty of this is that when working with animations and motion, you don't have to spin up a full emulator or build to a device to see what's going on. You can just play it within Android Studio, and you can see from start to end what it's going to look like, how fast it'll go, and it just makes it really simple to use, and it's very lightweight. So let's push play and you can see it in action. So we go to animation start, you can see missing murdered Indigenous women, you can see all the pieces. You go to animation end, you can see where it's going to end up. You see that the hand is changed and it's morphed to MMIW. When you click that arrow at the top, you can hit play and then you can see the animation go forward and back or however you want. So if you like, we can look at this again. So you have animation start, and then you can go to animation end to see where you're going to go. And then the arrow that goes across the two, you can click that to push play and it'll move in between each animation and so show you the full interpolation. It's a really cool feature. All right, now moment of truth. I want to show you where we're at in Android. We've got a lot of pieces together. It's still in progress. There's still things missing like the share page. We're still missing like changing the color of the hand, but this is where we're at today. And a huge shout out to Caitlin for doing the animations and motion layout, and the ones that you'll see in this video are the initial one and on the agreement page where the text slides up. So let me push play. So we've gotten through the 4 statistics. Hopefully you had a chance to read them if you haven't already. We're on the agreement page, and if you saw the nice animation of it going off screen to on screen and moving up, after the user reads this and hits agree, we're going to move to camera view. And you'll notice the red hand. It's transparent at this point. I'm working with Pete Soloway to change the hand to maybe use a multiply function or maybe just create instead of a texture, like a 3D object, and so we can add lighting and maybe a paint texture. And so that's in the works, and we'll be working on that as we can. We'll just keep playing as I talk, so it'll go through it again. When you click send to, that's going to bring up the share modal that's not there at the moment. But as you hit share, it's going to go and bring up the system view, the system share. And so that's not handled by us. That's just using Android's built-in features. And so it's going to be able to be used for Facebook, Instagram, anything you have installed on the device. You could save the image to your device and use it wherever you like. You could email it to somebody. It just makes it really simple to use the system share function because then it'll just tie into everything. Another note on the share modal, if they hit share with us, then we're hoping to save it to a database. And we're going to use those pictures for the collage view that I was talking about earlier. We hope to have some sort of process to weed out any disrespectful photos, and that is to be determined how and what we're going to do for that. So that will come in the future. All right. So I just wanted to say thanks to everyone working on this. It's quite a large team. There's room for more if you want to join. We have the UX team, and I've tried to break this out into discipline, but also in joining order. So it's mostly in joining order, but split out. Hopefully I did that as well as I could. My wife was one of the first, Rachel, and then Teresa, who did the designs that I showed previously. Pete was working on the hand and making it look better and maybe making a 3D model of it. Nicole's been working on the UX flow and making it work as best as possible and smoothly as possible. On iOS, we have Mark, who's a member of Natives in Tech. He's been helping out and done a great job. Callum's also working on iOS. He's been doing the AR side of things. On QA, we have Hung. She's been amazing. She just tested this the other day and found a few things that I didn't even notice, and on some devices that I don't have, and so she's been amazing help. For the database side of things, Jessica did a ton of research and found a much better way for the database to work, and I'm really excited to get the Android app in a place where we can send the data we have, the image, email, and state, to the database to be used on a website. The website still needs to be built. On Android, we have Caitlin and Caleb. Caitlin did a ton with the animations and has done a lot of work on those first few screens, and it's been amazing. Caleb's been helping out on the code and doing PR reviews. I'm also doing Android code, not as much as I would hope. I'm more playing the project lead, project manager on the team, so I don't get as much code in as I would like, but so it is. Yeah, so huge shout out to them. They're an amazing group, and I love working with each and every one of them. I'm just completely blown away by how quickly everyone joined and how excited they are to work on this project and help bring awareness to MMIW. So thank you to the team. Thank you to all who watched today and are listening. I want to say thank you to Adrian Larvey. He's the print that you see in behind my slides. He allowed me to use this as a backdrop, and it's a beautiful painting that he did on the topic of MMIW. I also want to thank Natives in Tech for allowing me to speak and putting this on. If you have any questions, you can reach out on LinkedIn or GitHub. If you have questions about joining the team or questions about AR core or motion layout, you can reach out. I will answer them as best I can. And if I don't have answers, I'll find them for you. So feel free. I'll be excited to talk to you. I've listed the sources at the bottom here. These are the sources that I used. So National Institute of Justice, Urban Indian Health Institute. If you're interested in AR core face meshing, there's the creativetet.blog. And if you're really interested in Android internals and want to know about interpolators, that's the video I used previously. So yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time and your willingness to learn more about MMIW on this project. I hope you all have a great day.
Thank you, Stephen, for that presentation on that very important topic and raising awareness around the issues of missing and murdered Indigenous women. Very interesting tech and just a very important topic right now. So we're going to take a very short break, but next up we're going to have Holly Grimm. She is Danae, and she's going to talk about Indigenous machine learning. So in 2 minutes, we will join back here and start her presentation. Okay, we're back. Like I said before, we're going to show Holly Grimm's presentation on Indigenous machine learning. She is Danae, so here we go.
Hi, my name is Holly Grimm. I'm a machine learning engineer and artist. I'm talking today about using machine learning for Indigenous applications. This animation was created using the landscape model in Artbreeder. I am Danae, Navajo, and I'm of the Bitani within his cover people and born for Biligana, Anglo. My maternal grandfather's clan is Tachini, red running into the water, and my paternal grandfather's clan is Biligana, Anglo. These are my grandparents with melons from their farm in Shiprock. I currently live in Santa Fe, New Mexico, also known as Ogapoge, which is unceded Tewa land. This area was part of a wide trade network where peoples as far as Mesoamerica would come here to trade macaw feathers and shells for turquoise found here locally. My partner John and I are stewards of a third of an acre of land here. I'm a water harvesting practitioner, and we've made several changes to harvest water. The first, as indicated by the lines in red, was to create a sponge by shaping the land into berms and basins to capture rainwater. As drought and heavy rain events are becoming more prevalent, it's important to capture all the rainwater we can. Next, we created 2 curb cuts, shown by the green lines, and built scoria wicks to capture stormwater running off the roads. Our latest work was to install a gray water infiltration system, shown in blue, to water our largest trees with water from our bath and sink. We've also planted numerous trees and plants. We try to follow the 3 ethics of permaculture: care of the earth, care of the people, and distribution of surplus back to the people and earth. Water harvesting techniques like check dams can be found at Mesa Verde and continue to be used today. The Chinapa artificial islands, as shown in the upper right, of the Aztecs were precursors to aquaponics systems, the lower right. With 10 billion people on our Earth by 2050, we have to rethink agricultural techniques that rely on irrigation and switch to aquaponic systems where fish and plants recirculate and clean the water. In 2017, after doing regular software development for more than 20 years, I had a realization that I needed to learn machine learning techniques. I started with an online course called Creative Applications of Deep Learning, then took more technical online classes with Andrew Ng. As a painter, I was excited by the painterly effects that I was able to achieve with the AI tools. I don't think the advances in machine learning have slowed down, and I hope that you can make them part of your toolbox. Or, as Andrej Karpathy says, neural networks are not just another classifier. They represent the beginning of a fundamental shift in how we write software. They are software 2.0. And on the right is another animation I created with Artbreeder. I'd like to start with a general overview of the technologies. Machine learning is a subset of artificial intelligence, and deep learning is a subset of machine learning. This definition of machine learning still stands from 1959. Machine learning is the field of study that gives computers the ability to learn without being explicitly programmed. I'll explain more of what this means in the next slide. The technology that has driven much of the recent improvements in machine learning is neural networks. Here's a simplified diagram of a neural network inspired by the human brain. Each circle is considered a neuron and is connected to other neurons. Here, the pixelated image of a bird is fed into the input layer of the network as individual pixels. Each neuron has weights associated with it, and calculations are fed forward through the network. When it reaches the output layer, the neural net makes a prediction. If the prediction is wrong, then the weights are fine-tuned, meaning each value is updated slightly. The network is then rerun with a new image. After many training steps, the weights are such that it predicts that the image is a hummingbird. I showed you a toy neural net as an example, but the latest deep learning neural nets can be huge. For instance, the text generator GPT-3 has 175 billion parameters. Better performing computers using graphics processing units have increased network sizes. As you add more and more hidden layers to the network, it allows a machine to learn complex concepts. There are two reasons that we've had so many interesting breakthroughs in machine learning. The first was better performance due to graphics processing units. The second is access to more data, also called big data. These two are driving the AI revolution. Here is another art breeder animation. Here's an example of the effect of larger neural networks and higher quality data sets over time. Every year from 2014 to 2018, better faces were generated by generative adversarial networks, or GANs. As Indigenous peoples, how do we position ourselves within these technologies? I recommend that you read the position paper on Indigenous protocol and artificial intelligence that was the result of 2 workshops held by the Indigenous Protocol and AI Working Group. In the paper, there are guidelines for developing responsible and fair AI systems within Indigenous communities. I think if we change our economic model, it'll naturally support the concepts in the Indigenous Protocol paper. Competition within a hierarchical structure precipitates overconsumption, extractivism, and colonization. Switching to collaboration of independent providers in a horizontal exchange system would promote balanced use of resources and greater inclusivity. There are 2 projects happening in the Indigenous voice AI space. The International Waukeshan AI Consortium was recently funded by a MIT Solve grant, building a shared voice AI for the Waukeshan languages, which is shown in pink on this map, as including part of Washington State, Vancouver Island, and the British Columbia mainland. Members of this group include Michael Runningwolf, Sean Sosi, Caroline Runningwolf, and Connor Donna Quinn. A second project is Correro Maori by Keone Mahelan, who will be speaking today about his project to preserve Te Reo Maori. Here are 3 project ideas that I'd like to use as examples of how we can use machine learning. The first would detect and create a data set of abandoned uranium mine sites. The second is an AI with Hawaiian values. And the third is a pose estimation tool for learning jingle dancing. 500 abandoned uranium mines exist across the Navajo Nation, represented by red dots on the map. The mines themselves are not the only contaminated areas. There was transportation of uranium between mines and processing plants through towns like Shiprock. Toxic tailings were dumped on the land, as pictured on the right. Uranium dust has also most likely contaminated the area along the roads. So how do we detect other areas of contamination? Machine learning has been used to detect radiation using gamma ray spectrometry. Here is a spatial map of hotspots detected in a case study site in Scotland. After we've located the sites, we'll need to create a data set. Recently, there was a paper, Traditional Ecological Knowledge Policy Considerations for Abandoned Uranium Mines on Navajo Nation, about using traditional ecological knowledge to clean up the mines. One way that machine learning could be of use is to collect features that address the Navajo's connection to nature. These may include observations on climate, vegetation, wildlife, or sacred locations. GPT-3 is a language model from OpenAI which has evolved over the past few years. Here I am prompting the network with Jason Edward Lewis's description of a Hawaiian AI. The Hawaiian god of artificial intelligence, Ako Akamai, is built on Ako architecture, Aloha, Aina, love of the land, Kuleana, responsibility, and Ohana, family. Its first assumption is abundance. Its first duty is to preserve that abundance for future generations. It looks to the land and family first to understand what is important for supporting their flourishing. So then that's his prompt, and now I wrote this sentence. One legend tells of a competition between Ako Akamai and a traditional artificial intelligence to develop a tool to help humanity. So I click generate. GPT-3 generates this text. AI built a robot called the machine, which was designed to predict human behavior. Ako Akamai built an AI called Lukia, which taught humans how to predict the future and offered to travel with them on their journey. The people built an army of robots to help with their protection, but when they came to a great chasm, they could not cross. When Ake Akamai asked for help, the machine offered to build a bridge over the chasm, failed to build a bridge sturdy enough. Lukia taught the people how to build a bridge themselves, and the army of robots saved the people by acting as pillars for the bridge. At this point, the people turned on the machine, and the machine could not predict this turn of events. Ako Akamai uses its own value system to suggest that it is better. Another way to preserve our culture is by saving our dances. In this video, I'm running the Blaze Pose model on a video of a jingle dancer. The upper body Blaze Pose model tracks 25 landmarks, as seen in the image on the upper right. This technology could be used to teach dance lessons or categorize historic dance footage. When building the dataset, you'd need to document the dataset and flag sacred dances. Machine learning requires large datasets. There is a comprehensive paper and tool available for documenting your dataset called Data Sheets for Datasets. On the right is a great Markdown template on GitHub that you can use for your dataset with questions that address motivation, composition, collection process, pre-processing and cleaning and labeling, recommended uses, distribution, and maintenance. The best way to learn is to select a project that inspires you. Chances are that with some searching you'll find a similar project to what you're trying to accomplish. There are some great tools like ArtBreeder and Runway ML that don't require any ML coding experience. Then there are Google Colabs and Python notebooks for Python coders. Lastly, you can clone GitHub repositories with ML projects built with TensorFlow or PyTorch libraries. Build your dataset and make sure you fill out your data sheets for datasets. Finally, share your code in GitHub or your results with a blog post. Here's my contact information, holly.grimm@gmail.com, and you can find me on Twitter at hollygrimm. Also, please visit these websites for more information on Indigenous AI and events. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Holly, on those very important questions related to machine learning and artificial intelligence. We're going to take a short break. We're going to return at 2 p.m. Central Daylight Time, and we will have Jeff Doctor speaking on his topic, Decolonizing Digital, How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love ID Solve. So we will have a quick 6-minute break and return at 2 p.m. Central Time. And we are back. Jeff Doctor of the Cayuga Nation, his title of his presentation, Decolonizing Digital, How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love ID Solve.
Hello, welcome to my talk. My name is Jeff Doctor. I'm Cayuga from Six Nations of the Grand River Territory. Today I'll be discussing Indigenous data sovereignty, IDSOV, what it is, why it's important, how I got into it, and how the company I work for, Animiki, supports it through our software called Niwin. Now, I'm a strategist at Animiki. This means I do a lot of the behind-the-scenes work on software development. I don't actually do any of the coding or any of those kinds of things. I'm more involved in client relations, so road mapping, doing interviews, doing risk analysis for custom software, that sort of thing. My background isn't actually in tech, it's sociology. So I also work on the internal governance for Animiki, the giving back side of our business. We're a certified B Corp. That means we're a social enterprise that's still a for-profit company, but our primary motivator isn't generating capital, it's our social impact. I'll talk about that a little bit later, but for now, let's just say our mission is using tech to empower Indigenous peoples. This includes working with them to get their data back, thus the interest in Indigenous data sovereignty. So, what is IDSOV? Well, it's certainly not reflected in this painting. If anything, this represents the exact opposite. It's a fabrication. It's a lie about manifest destiny, this fiction about us that wasn't told by us. If anything, this painting represents what happens when Indigenous data sovereignty isn't respected. So, the official definition is very much about rights, specifically affirming them. And these are the rights of Indigenous peoples to control the collection, access, analysis, interpretation, management, dissemination, and reuse of Indigenous data. This definition comes from the landmark 2016 book, Indigenous Data Sovereignty Towards an Agenda. It's a collection of works from leading scholars in the field. It's really the best go-to for any official definitions. It really established the term Indigenous data sovereignty at a very high level and frames the discussion in a really good way that I highly recommend you go check it out. So I do want to say one thing that Indigenous data sovereignty, to me at least, is an inherent right. It goes along with the rest of our inherent rights, and only relatively recently have we come up with it as a common term and a definition to describe something that's really always been there. So, like the rest of our inherent rights, to our lands, to our waters, to our resources, to the various things that have always been ours, regardless of whether settlers are here or not, it's the same thing with data. We've always had it, we always will have it, and because we've always had our sovereignty that we've never ceded, well, we also have sovereignty over our data. However, due to colonization, this inherent right hasn't been respected for a very long time. So this leads to a big aspect of our contemporary lives. There's this saying you sometimes hear in tech of what gets measured gets valued. So this image is from the census of 1871 in, I think, Upper Canada, I guess what is now called the province of Ontario in the Dominion of Canada. Yeah, I don't know if a lot of people really remember this, but Canada called itself a Dominion when it was created. It's super imperial. And we've always been an imperial resource colony, but the rebranding of Canada has turned it into this nice, happy, fuzzy peacekeeping state. But quite frankly, like Manifest Destiny, it's another lie. Canada has a very long history of genocide, and this includes using data against people, especially Indigenous peoples. And the census is actually a pretty interesting example of this. So as you can see here, they've literally erased our identities. Now, Haudenosaunee, my peoples, were called Six Nations because we're literally a confederacy of 6 different nations. Mohawk, Oneida, Onondaga, Cayuga, Seneca, and more recently Tuscarora. Yet you can see here that sometime after this initial record was created, someone literally came and crossed out these nations and replaced them with the word Indian. So this is interesting because even in my own case, I often get asked where my last name comes from. the name doctor seems to be kind of abnormal. Every time I buy groceries, people are always saying, hey, if you became a doctor, you'd be doc. Yes, I know. So I thought, what would happen if I just kept digging into the census records and try to figure out where the heck this name actually came from? And it turns out that this might actually be it. I'm not entirely sure, but there's a lot of Isaac Doctors in my family. It's a pretty common name, and we have the tendency to pass the same name down through the generations. Yet, here you see he's listed as a quack doctor who couldn't read or write English. And the really amusing part is that just above it, you can see that there's someone else. This is the same reserve, but a different page on the records. You have an English person who was listed as his occupation as Doctor of Medicine. So when we're talking about what gets measured, gets valued, even something as seemingly mundane as a census record contains a pretty brutal value judgment. So in so-called Canada, the Indian Act was passed about 5 years after this census. This is 1871. So Indian Act came into effect, give or take, 1876. And it's possible that the bureaucrats just wanted to lump together everyone as Indians, because under the Indian Act, it was really created as an assimilatory tool. It's not meant to respect us as sovereign peoples. It's meant to fold us under the dominion of Canada, and not as actual members of nations in a nation-to-nation relationship, but as wards of the state. And so through the Indian Act, you get what's called Indian status. Now, in terms of data, this is actually very important, because when you're registered as a, quote, Indian, and you have Indian status in so-called Canada, they issue you a status card, or more specifically, a certificate of Indian status. Now, this is a super racist notion, is under the Indian Act, we're defined through just like down south, a blood quantum. And it's a pretty ridiculous way to measure the identity of a person. It's like we're measuring the breed of, like, say, a dog or a horse. And it's super controversial, so I'm not going to get into the nuances of blood quantum, but for the purposes of this discussion, let's just talk about how the government of Canada ultimately conceptualizes First Nations people, me, as an example, as a series of numbers. So on my certificate of Indian status card, you actually see registry group number instead of nation. So while I personally identify as Cayuga, as a member of the Haudenosaunee, the government of Canada designates me as a member of registry group 249 with basically the designator Upper Cayuga. So they have no concept of sovereignty or respect for the Cayuga Nation. They just see us as just another registry group. And within this registry group, they designate you with a family number. So in this case, I'm not going to list my family number, but the tag on it would be basically doctor. And then, like I said, I don't really know if that's a name that we gave ourselves or was given to us, or I should say forced upon us by missionaries, or I have no idea. But regardless, Canada doesn't really care about that. It cares about my family number. And that family number will help them determine my, quote, blood quantum. And I'm not super sure how all of this works. I've never actually worked for Indigenous Services Canada, which is the branch of the government that handles these things. And I've never worked for membership in a First Nation. I did work for the Songhees Nation in lands and housing, and so we did have to work on some membership stuff. But because I've never really had the inside view on how membership works exactly, you got to take a little bit of this a grain of salt. It's just what I've been able to figure out so far. So the next part on my certificate of Indian status number is the position number. And so you've got your registry group, you've got your family, and then within your family you have a position. So I think when you get registered past a certain age, you get your own family number, and then if you have kids, then they get a position in that family. So I think because I registered when I was past 16, I have my own family number and my own position in that family. I think. Like, it's all a bit of a black box, and this stuff isn't clearly documented elsewhere, but I'm pretty sure that's right. But obviously, if somebody wants to correct me on that, I'm happy to learn. But regardless, this whole concept of Indian registration is ridiculously colonial, and the irony is that it also has some benefits because it creates at least some sort of standard, some sort of almost identifier to. Oops, wasn't supposed to click that. It creates basically an identifier that can, quote, prove that you are who you say you are, that you have a claim to this identity as First Nations person, and it's validated by the government. Now, I'm not super sure how this works down south of the imaginary lines. My understanding that tribes themselves control this information, but in Canada, it's backwards. Basically, it's the federal government that gets to, quote, determine who is or isn't First Nations. And I'm not talking about Métis or Inuit people. That's a whole nother aspect, legally speaking, of indigeneity in so-called Canada. So really what I'm talking about mostly in this discussion is First Nations people who fall under this Indian Act. So under this Indian Act, it gives you your status number, and then let's say you want to apply for a job, or you want to gain access to some sort of programming from your bands or your nation. Well, you can very quickly show your status card and then see it's stamped by the government. It's got a bunch of like fancy anti-fraud devices and so on and so forth, just like your driver's license or something like that. But because of the way that the Indian Act works, as I said earlier, it's assimilatory. It's not meant to create us as sovereign nations. It's meant to assimilate us into Canada. And so there's this concept called the second generation cutoff, which is basically legislated that if you don't continuously marry and have kids with someone else that also has status, then eventually your kids, your grandkids, just won't have status anymore. And so while they very may well be a member of a community and identify as a First Nations person through whatever nation that they belong to, the federal government won't recognize that. They won't recognize their, quote, status. And so even within a certain family, even within a household, you might have some people that have status and some people that don't, because of this complicated web of often sexist and just ridiculous colonial law. So one of the big challenges is how can we create a data system that still respects the way that people want to identify themselves, but still has some sort of way to validate that experience with the community that they're claiming to be a part of. And so far, we're relying on these status cards, but it's clearly a problem. Now, that said, this leaks into so many other aspects of Indigenous data, including research data, statistics data, health data, census data. All of these measurements about us, it's very difficult to determine the validity of those findings, because if it's based on self-identification, and a lot of folks don't necessarily understand what it means to be Indigenous. They may get an Indigenous identity mixed up with the concept of like heritage, meaning that if the form asks, hey, do you have Indigenous ancestry? Well, you might think, well, I heard, 4 generations back, I might have a grandmother who may or may not have been First Nations, and so, yeah, I've got ancestry, and you tick it off on the box. That's fine, whatever, but that's very different than somebody who has direct current contemporary ties to an Indigenous community, that they claim that identity, and then that community claims that identity, like claims them. So if a researcher or somebody collecting data doesn't understand these different nuances, and worse, has no way to validate those persons' claims to indigeneity, then how do you know that any of that data is ultimately valid? If it's, its core identifier, the person that's related to, that's a pretty big variable that is hard to determine. So we see this all the time, including in this hilarious slide. So we've probably all seen this by now. It was memed to death basically already by Indigenous folks, but it's basically a very interesting example of what happens when Indigenous data sovereignty isn't conceptualized of or respected. So the thing is, remember when I said that whatever gets measured gets valued? Well, this image is an example of that. It demonstrates an aspect of white supremacy, this notion that you have certain, quote, races, and then if something doesn't fit nicely within that box, then it becomes other or something else. And in this case, pollsters couldn't even bother humanizing somebody that deviates from their perception of whatever it is that's normal. And this is a huge problem in any data about any kind of peoples. So it's not exclusive to Indigenous data sovereignty, but it's certainly a big part of it. And I'm not going to get too much into the nuances of the statistical side of things. That's well covered elsewhere. So I'll just give kind of a brief overview about what I even mean by Indigenous data. So really, it's kind of any information that's recorded that relates to Indigenous peoples, or lands, or knowledges, cultures, resources. Honestly, it's anything about us or anything that's from us. Anything that impacts Indigenous lives, well, that's Indigenous data. So Indigenous data governance, that involves the processes where this information about us or from us, it's recorded, stored, analyzed, shared. It's an essential part of Indigenous data sovereignty that's not just about the data, but how that data is governed. So you might have heard of the FAIR principles. These refer to making data findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. And these are all very good things, but Indigenous data has a lot more complications involved due to the inherent extractive and exploitative nature of colonialism. If we leave all our data just to continuously be opened, then it's going to continuously cause problems. We need sovereignty over our data. Otherwise, colonizers are going to continue doing whatever they want with it, and you're going to get ridiculous results like this exit poll. So fortunately, super smart Indigenous folks have been working on this problem for many years, and in a meeting, I think it was 2018, they came up with their own set of principles called CARE, C-A-R-E. And when used in combination with the FAIR principles, you get this nice tagline of be fair and care. And so it's not to say that we should not use other principles, but sometimes, particularly with Indigenous data, we also have to create our own set of data principles to meet our own needs. So what are these CARE principles? Well, first, it's collective benefits. So there's got to be some sort of tangible benefit to Indigenous peoples when their data is collected or used. And then you have the authority to control. So ultimately, this is Indigenous peoples have rights to their data. And this is both a collective and an individual right. And it includes free, prior, and informed consent in really all aspects of data collection and use. Then you have responsibility that these data should be supporting Indigenous people's rights to self-determination. There needs to be some sort of accountability to this, and really ultimately healthy, respectful relations that are involved that aren't simply extractive, which leads into ethics and Indigenous people's rights, their well-being, and ultimately minimizing any harm and maximizing benefit to Indigenous peoples. Really, at the end of the day, data can't continuously be used as just another tool of oppression and injustice. So, to be exact, these are what CARE calls the guiding principles for scientific data management and stewardship. They shouldn't necessarily be applied to all aspects of data, but quite frankly, I don't see why not. They're very good kind of guiding principles, and I don't have time to get into them much further here, so I'll just point to the Global Indigenous Data Alliance at the website there, gita-global.org. I had nothing to do with developing these principles. I don't have any direct affiliations with GITA, so I can't take any credit for any of this stuff. So instead, I'm going to point to networks of really cool Indigenous folks that are working on these overarching principles and concepts. Because ultimately, Indigenous data sovereignty is a movement just as much as it is a concept. So I really recommend checking out these other networks for further information based on your territory. So if you're looking at so-called New Zealand, so-called Australia, and then south of the imaginary line, there's quite a few groups and institutions throughout the world that are working on more specific aspects of Indigenous data sovereignty and governance. But I do recommend checking out the Global Indigenous Data Alliance for further details. That site is updated often with the most new resources. So next I'll talk a little bit about how I got into this whole Indigenous data sovereignty thing. Because honestly, like, my background is in sociology, yet I work for a tech company. So how'd that happen? Well, quite frankly, I think a lot about stuff like this. See, I grew up playing 4X strategy games, you know, the whole explore, expand, exploit, exterminate thing. You know, how much more colonial can you get? But that's just my childhood. My mom's parents are from Eastern Europe, and my dad's dad is Cayuga. So my dad's side of the family, they passed down the same land ever since really the early 1800s. And that's a long story itself I won't get into here. But ultimately, between my ancestors' friendship with the British, some might say they sold out. I don't know how to frame that. But, and then, you know, the horrors of the residential school experiences. Like, honestly, the Indigenous side of my family's been mostly assimilated and largely disconnected from the wider Haudenosaunee-like communities. So that's led me and my family to having really complicated, disconnected identity. In some ways, it's been largely tokenistic until relatively recently, and this includes how we've even branded our own business on our own lands. So some might call that indigenizing, or making aspects of our business or identity more indigenous. Now, the problem with this concept or this way of thinking to kind of make something more indigenous is that it doesn't necessarily change the status quo. It's more figuring out how to participate through the politics of recognition. And indigenizing something, it's pretty problematic when it doesn't ultimately change the fundamental relationship. So if something is inherently colonial, like this video game, for example, and all of the Civilization series, indigenizing it doesn't really make it any less harmful. It just changes the brand or changes the face of those responsible for oppressing others. So this is where the concept of decolonizing comes in. So to be fair, decolonizing is really quickly becoming a buzzword, and sometimes I worry that I'm using it a little inappropriately to describe something that's really probably closer to the lines of indigenizing, and this can all get really nuanced and controversial, but you know, simply put, decolonizing it's inherently a more violent act. It essentially involves deconstructing, destroying, overthrowing whatever colonial system of injustice. And this includes the way that one thinks. It includes the way that one conceptualizes their life and the way that they live. So for me, it's thinking about this every day. Sometimes this is called the Hiawatha Belt. It's often used as a flag for the Haudenosaunee, and it encompasses so much of our worldview through what can be called the Great Law of Peace. And don't have time to get into all that, but really what I'm trying to get at is that decolonizing really means changing the way that one thinks about data from a colonial relationship based on extraction and transactions to one that's much more based on relationships of reciprocity and responsibility. And these values are inherently a part of a lot of Indigenous worldviews, but it goes much deeper than that. Decolonization, really it must be about actions of disruption, but also recreation. So you're both destroying, but you gotta create something in its place. So in my own struggle of thinking, like, you know, even when we're calling our work decolonizing, is it more indigenizing? Is it more decolonizing? Are these kind of like false terms that we shouldn't really be using? You know, I asked basically a question on Twitter, and somebody came up with basically the term reseeding. They shared this with me that this might be a different way of thinking about it. And I thought, yeah, that's kind of spot on. And it's something that, land defenders are doing all the time. And this includes back home at my own home territory, Six Nations of the Grand River, at 1492 Landback Lane. They're not only stopping an illegal housing development, which is illegal under both Canadian and Haudenosaunee law, quite frankly, but they're literally reseeding the ground that was stripped bare. And the rebuilding community in a space that was planned to be just McMansions full of settler neighbors who honestly would never really know or even care for each other. So they're exercising the rights to sovereignty, but they're doing so based on old traditions. And this is important because sovereignty, including Indigenous data sovereignty, it needs to scale. So this leads me to my time with Animiki. As I said previously, we're an Indigenous company that serves to empower Indigenous peoples through tech. The company was started by Jeff Ward in 2003 to build websites and generally help out Indigenous organizations and communities with their basic tech issues. By 2014, Jeff realized he really needed his own content management system. It just wasn't really an effective use of his time to continuously recode websites for clients when they just needed to make minor changes. They needed a way to do it themselves. It's not quite data sovereignty, but it's a step in that direction based on the tech that was available. By 2010, Jeff was doing more complicated custom software projects. This includes the big one we still work on today, Sanius Cultural Safety Training. It's an e-learning platform, and it's also not quite data sovereignty, but it's very much in the theme of nothing about us without us. And by 2015, Jeff, he started hiring more staff and started basing it on the Songhees Nation. And doing so was a way to build ties and relationships with members of the community, and they started the Innovation Center to support other Indigenous entrepreneurs. This gave us a hub to develop more tech ecosystems, and that's how I actually met the company. I was working down the hall for Songhees Nation as their land and housing coordinator. Jeff and I would bump into each other from time to time. We'd chat over coffee. It turns out we were thinking about the same things in regards to Indigenous data sovereignty. We just didn't really have a name for it at the time. Because I was spending a lot of time digitizing files and really figuring out how we can make better policy decisions based on good data. But I needed control over that data first, and I discovered that so much of data, even at the governance level, for First Nations isn't actually held by First Nations. It's often held by the federal government, and a lot of my job involved really snatching these data back so that the nation can build its own data sets independent of interference from really the feds. So fast forward to today, I'm not working for Songhees anymore. I'm now with Animiki, and we're up to almost 20 full-time staff. Our biggest challenge is managing between these poles of bringing in revenue and our social impacts, trying to do so in a way that we can still afford to operate and pay our staff fair wages without really taking too much, charging too much for our services. And this is a big challenge that can be called managing polarity. Jeff wrote about it in our blog. It was called Wings of a Bird, Managing Polarity. As far as I know, there's not a lot of Indigenous tech companies in this space that we can look to for guidance. So we really need to carve out this path on our own. So it begs the question, how can we not only be an Indigenous tech company in terms of ownership, but also action and social impact? So let's take a bit of a pause here. For non-Indigenous people, you might be thinking, cool, I should be using these principles in my own work, even though I'm not necessarily working or dealing with Indigenous people. Well, that's not necessarily bad, but you really need to be careful that you're not co-opting anything, because Indigenous data sovereignty and the principles that come out of it are really by and for Indigenous people. So you can borrow elements of them from your own work, but just be very cautious that you're not watering them down or you're serving other interests than what they were meant for. There's obviously a big history of all things Indigenous being co-opted, and there's a danger that even Indigenous data sovereignty as a concept, as these principles, could be co-opted as well. Then you might ask, well, I know I'm not dealing with Indigenous data, so why do I even care? Well, quite frankly, you might be, and you might not even know it. So what I mean by that is that there's a lot of Indigenous people in the world, and we're super diverse. So one of the big challenges is that even the term Indigenous can hide so much. Really, it's a concept that's inherently linked to colonialism. Without colonialism, we would just be peoples, and that's always called ourselves whatever we call ourselves, often literally the people. But since we live in relation to those who have since come to occupy our lands, Indigenous is really a sweeping term to describe this relationship to colonization, more than it is anything about us as Indigenous peoples. Now, this is super tricksy when it comes to data because we're really hard to count. And so I've seen estimates ranging anywhere from 370 to 500 plus million Indigenous peoples in the world. And part of the reason that this is such a difficult data challenge is that we all live in states that occupy our territories. And it's often these states that come up with these numbers. And quite frankly, colonial states have an interest in erasing us, either literally through genocide so that they can take our land, or through data so that they can justify taking our land. This goes all the way back to the notion of terra nullius, that there aren't Indigenous peoples making use of land in a way at least that colonizers saw fit. So colonizers then deem that they have the right to take it. It's ridiculous, but quite frankly, that basic fiction of terra nullius is still with us and embedded in so many colonial legal structures even to today. So, I mean, almost half of the world's land is either held by Indigenous peoples or we have some sort of direct relation to it. That's half the world. And while I won't break this down, like this map, all the colors on it really indicate, well, I'm not going to get into it. You can check it out at landmarkmap.org because it's obviously super complicated. But just I wanted to use this image just as a quick demonstration of just seeing that just states that you might not even conceptualize as having any relationship to Indigenous people. I'm pretty sure they do. And really, when it comes down to it, no matter really where you live in this world, I can almost guarantee that you have some sort of relationship to either Indigenous lands or Indigenous peoples. And this is very interesting because statistically speaking, of this land, of this basically 50% of the land that Indigenous people have a relationship to, it's where 80% of the world's biodiversity remains. So if you work in any environmental field, anything based on resources or anything involving energy, transportation, infrastructure, quite frankly, most things, you're probably going to be somewhat dealing with Indigenous peoples and their lands. You just might not know it. So this is important because, quite frankly, the future is Indigenous. I know this is a bit of a catchphrase, but I honestly think it's true that colonization made this mess that we're all in today. You know, climate change, all these ridiculous political catastrophes, global wars, and so much of the destruction of the earth can really only be explained through the lens of colonization. Something that hasn't stopped or just magically gone away. So with this in mind, we wrote the series called Decolonizing Digital. You can find it and more stuff that we write at animiki.com/news. And I write about other things there too as well, but this series is directly about Indigenous data sovereignty. There's 6 parts, they're relatively self-explanatory, so I'm not going to explain every one. But really, I recommend if you work in tech, which I'm assuming most people watching this do, you check out the last one. We're trying to summarize some key considerations about not only developing what we would call Indigenous tech, but technology involving Indigenous people, or really that could benefit anyone, really. So unfortunately, we're still in very early developments of our own product that we're using to support Indigenous data sovereignty. So I can't show you any wireframes or things of that sort. But what I can show you is our super cool logo. So it's called Niwin. What it is it's a Rails app that builds other Rails apps. And in more simple terms, what that means is that we do a lot of work building custom web apps. So these are applications that work through a browser and are ultimately based on the internet. And what we found is that when we're doing a lot of the custom software work that we do, some very similar use cases were occurring across different communities. But at the same time, we still had to respect that every use case is very different. So the problem with developing custom software from scratch is that some of the basic kind of building blocks can be the same in different places, but the more nuanced details of what that community or what that organization needs to be customizable as well. So Niwin is a balance of building a code that can code its own basic aspects while still leaving itself open to build more customizable aspects depending on the needs of that community or those people. So it's literally the opposite of one size fits all while still maintaining the balance of customizability that's needed. So the word Niwin is for the number 4 in Anishinaabe-Moan, and that's the language of the founder and the CEO, Jeff Ward. And the number 4 is sacred in a lot of communities. There's a lot of teachings that are based on 4 kind of core principles or 4 teachings. And when we're building this tech, we're very much always considering the notions of connection. So connecting data to other data so that you can basically gain better value out of it and learn more. Restitution, restoring, quite frankly, what are ancient data systems. Balance, all things, they require balance, that data can't be exploitative, it can't be harmful, it still needs to benefit people. And there needs to always be balance within your data. And assertion, so assertion of rights, assertion of data sovereignty, assertion of land rights, assertion of all the aspects of indigeneity that have been left by the wayside for so long. So in terms of the icon, largely it's been inspired by the teachings in the Turo Wampum, which is actually behind me here. And big aspects of this are ultimately about the relationship between settlers and Indigenous folks, or in other language, Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples. So in the Turo, you've got the one line representing the Haudenosaunee canoe, and the other line representing the European tall ship. And in our logo, we wanted to kind of hint towards that relationship of respect, friendship, and sovereignty, while at the same time also kind of showing the lands that we live in. So you've got the mountains, the rivers, and the way that information kind of flows is also very similar to rivers as well. So there's so much to talk about in that logo that I think is really interesting, but really the big thing is, like, why are we doing this? Why are we building this tech? And we're constantly thinking about what it means to rebuild these relationships with our data. And so I talked earlier about indigenizing, decolonizing, reseeding. I mean, whatever term you want to use, I suppose that's up to you. But ultimately, what we're trying to do is really get data back to where they belong. And that's really the ultimate purpose of Niwin. I wish I could give more technical talk on it, but we're not quite at that stage where we can do that. But really, the big thing that I just want to emphasize is #databack. So for further details about Animiki, you can check out our website at animiki.com. You can reach me at jeff.doctor@animiki.com or via LinkedIn. I'm actually most active on Twitter, though. I use that as a reading list of sorts. So if you want to go down some further rabbit holes, I try to use that to really not only amplify the voices of folks that are much smarter than me, but just as a really good way to learn. So thank you for listening, Nyama, and I hope you all have a good day.
Thank you, Jeff Doctor, on that excellent talk on Indigenous data sovereignty. We have one more speaker left for the conference. That is Keone Mahalona. His presentation is Te Reo Maori, Speech Recognition, a story of community trust and sovereignty. We're going to take a short 5-minute break, and we will start at 2:45 Central Time. And we are back. The last and next presenter is Keone Mahalona, Te Reo Maori Speech Recognition, A Story of Community Trust and Sovereignty. He is also a native Hawaiian, and here we go.
Aloha kākou, no Hawaii ahau o Keone ko Uinoa. I'm from Hawaii and my name is Keone. Today I'll be talking about Te Reo Maori speech recognition. And this is really a story about our community, building trust in that community, and sovereignty. I am a Hawaiian and I work at a Maori organization. And I want to bring that up as a particular point because Hawaiians and Maori have been working together for quite a long time. In fact, a lot of Indigenous people work closely with one another. And in this picture here, this was taken at a star compass that was built by Sir Heke Nukumai Puhipi. That's the man in the red shirt in the golf cart. And this hui that we had, this meeting, was around Maori data sovereignty. Now, next to Sir Uncle Hector is Nainoa Thompson. Now, Nainoa Thompson is a Hawaiian, and he is, both of them were instrumental in the revitalization of traditional voyaging canoes. And so Nainoa Thompson, in his younger years, went to Aotearoa and worked alongside and studied under Uncle Hector. And so that was part of their transfer of knowledge. And so I wanted to remind us of that link of the Hawaiians and the Maori, because we've been working together for quite a long time. And even today, I'm here as a Hawaiian and I work with Te Hiku Media, a Maori nonprofit organization. And the main reason for that is my partner, who's in the middle there, just next to Nainoa, is Maori. And so, yeah, we're a Hawaiian Maori couple, and yeah, this is what happens. So just a brief outline of my kōrero today. I really want to talk about the journey of Te Hiku Media as a Maori radio organization. And through that journey, there's themes of kaitiakitanga or guardianship, as well as sovereignty or tino rangatiratanga. And I think that really shows how we were able to build a Maori automatic speech recognition system. And then at the end of my talk, I'd just like to give some demos of some of the things that we're working on. So just some background information. Our organization represents 5 iwi from the far north of Aotearoa. So this is a map here of New Zealand, and the North Island is known as Te Ika a Maui. That's the fish of Maui, who was a god. And Te Hiku is the tail. So we're at the very north of the North Island. And by virtue of that, we're known as the tail of the fish. And so the 5 tribes that we represent as an organization are Ngāti Kuri, Te Aupōuri, Ngai Takoto Te Rarawa, and Ngāti Kahu. Now, New Zealand has a founding document which is known as Te Tiriti o Waitangi. This was a treaty that was signed by a number of tribes, Maori tribes, and the British Crown in 1840. So our organization was formed in 1990. We've been around for almost 30 years. It started out as a radio station, and our organization was born out of the language revitalization movement that started in the 70s and continued into the 80s and even till this day. There was a particular bit of legislation that opened up the airwaves or the radio frequencies to give Maori a place on those frequencies so they could broadcast in their language and broadcast the stories of their people. And actually the treaty is what enabled that. So yeah, Maori nonprofit organization. We're now a team of about 20 people, and we definitely look at intertribal, so that's amongst Maori, and inter-indigenous or pan-indigenous relationships as part of our strategy as an organization. So the vision of our organization is really about transmitting language intergenerationally, and that's key for keeping languages alive, is that intergenerational transmission of language and culture and knowledge. And the mission really for our organization is about preserving and promoting the reo specific to the Haukainga, that is our region, which is the north of the North Island. There are 21 iwi radio stations in Aotearoa. Each of us represent various tribes throughout the country. And because there's 21 of us, we're able to tell the stories in the dialects that are unique to Maori throughout the country. And so that's really important in terms of language revitalization, which is preserving that nuances of the language across the regions. So here we have some of our kuya or elders, and the woman on the far right is my partner's grandmother. She was born in the late 19th century, and part of the archives at Te Hiku Media include an interview from Ma Jones, and that just shows you, I guess, the types of native speaker archives that Te Hiku Media has collected over the years, and that we now look after. We are in the process of digitizing these tapes. So because it's 2020, well, this started in 2014, our whole digital move, but a lot of the people from these 5 iwi that our organization represents actually don't live in our region or in the area that our terrestrial broadcast can reach. A lot of people have moved to the cities for jobs, and some people have moved overseas to Australia, for example, for work. So often our people are looking to reconnect with their iwi, with their community, with the language, particularly the language from the far north. And having a place online is essential for us to reach iwi members. And so this here is our website, tehiku.nz. It's a Django-based content management system, and we put everything in it. So this is really our repository. This is where we store our archives now, in this website. One thing we do a lot in the communities is live stream community events. That is, for example, here we have kapahaka, that's a cultural performance. We also live stream manu kōrero, speech competitions, wakaama, canoe paddling, and any other event that our community ask us to live stream. And live streaming this is about providing access to the event for those people who aren't able to make it to the event. And in this case here with kapahaka, we will broadcast a bunch of performances from different groups, from different schools, and we'll take those performances and cut them up and upload them to the website, so they're like on-demand videos of each of the school's performances. And so it's really a great way for friends and family and the community to access their culture from tehiku.nz. So since this website was launched in 2014, and we've been capturing a lot of language, a lot of stories, a lot of traditional knowledge, and even now we're uploading some of the archives that we're digitizing into our Whare Kōrero, into this website. And so looking into the future, we're thinking about how do we enhance access to our Indigenous language, to Te Reo Māori. And so one idea we had was this collection here called Te Reo o Te Kāinga. Now this is a collection of native speaker interviews. These are video interviews that were done completely in Te Reo Māori. These interviews were transcribed, and then in those transcriptions, we've highlighted colloquialisms, idioms, what we call kiwaha, or words that are unique to Te Tai Tokero, unique to the region where the 5 iwi come from. And this is one thing fluent speakers of Te Reo Māori strive to achieve, is to bring back the native sound and the native reo, the native language. And by listening to native speakers and accessing those archives, we can resurface some of the nuances or uniqueness of the reo that might have since been lost due to colonization and language loss. So I just want to show this collection here on the website.
No te kāinga o te kao, te kai kōrero e whai ake nei.
So what you see here is a moving transcription. So as the video plays, you see the part of the caption or the transcription that's highlighted. And in this red here are particular words that we've decided to tag in this transcription. And so Ingo Arohe, that's a place name. So Tekao is a place, that's where Auntie Lenny, the elder there, that's where she lives. Taputini, that's a type of kumara, a type of sweet potato. And that's a word and a sweet potato that comes from the region. And so it is a word unique to this area. And so you'll see that as you watch, as a fluent speaker would watch this collection, they could discover these words and see where they exist in the context of other interviews in the archive. So here, this word mahinga. So this word is used by these two elders in different interviews. And actually, when you click these links, it'll take you to that place in the interview where that word is used. So it's a really great way to help people rediscover words that might not be in common use today because of colonization, and learn about those words in context, as opposed to just looking at the definition, which is right here, the definition. So the thing about this collection is these transcriptions were done by very proficient speakers of Te Reo Māori, and also speakers that come from the region, because these elders speak a reo that is unique to our area, and so not many people are able to understand them completely, or even understand what the colloquialisms and the idioms are. So Peter Lucas Jones, here, our CEO, he's one of the people who transcribed this. It took a really long time to transcribe these 10 interviews, and then these transcribers had to go in and find these words and label them and type up the definitions, all done manually by hand, on a computer, and it took a really long time. So we thought, well, why don't we use some of the cool technology that exists, such as speech recognition, to help speed up the process of transcribing. Well, as you all know, speech recognition isn't available really in Indigenous languages. So this is around 2016, 2017. And so we knew we needed this technology, and so we decided, hey, we have to build it ourselves. So we launched this project, Kōrero Māori, which was about teaching computers Indigenous languages. Obviously, the focus was on Te Reo Māori. I'm a Hawaiian, so I would love to have Hawaiian speech recognition, which is a work in progress. And so, yeah, it was really this vision of giving Indigenous languages a place in digital platforms. And for us, we really needed access to Te Reo Māori speech recognition. So how does one build automatic speech recognition? Well, the first step is to just go and find some open source package out there. There are numerous packages to do speech recognition, and each have their own sort of benefits. We went with Deep Speech because it worked really well for us. The other thing you need to do is collect enough data. And what's enough? So for Te Reo Māori, the language is much more simple in terms of the lexicon and things when you look at, say, for example, Chinese or English. So we think what that means is you probably don't need as much data as you might need, say, to do English speech recognition as you would for Te Reo Māori. So we had to collect a lot of text and utterances, and then we also had to quality assure that data to ensure that the data we're feeding these machine models was correct. So once you have all that, you can train a model. And once you do have a model that sort of works, what we learned was that it's really important to put that model back into your loop so you can use it to actually further grow your corpus. So you can use it to help you to whether it's review data or even help you to transcribe more data to help improve your speech recognition. So I want to show this web app that we built, which is kōreromaori.com. This app, I guess, sort of streamlines the process of collecting data and reviewing data. We started this 2016, 2017. So there weren't really many tools out there. I think that's the same time Mozilla's Common Voice project started. And so it made sense for us to actually to build our own platform to collect the data, because now this site is a database of speech, of text, of so many things that's helping our project around speech recognition and natural language processing. So what you see here is just a sentence. So you go to the site, you click the record button, and you're presented with sentences, and all you need to do is record yourself reading the sentence, listen back to it to make sure you read it properly, and then hit the save button. Karukuruku tu te wini wini, tu te wana wana. Karukuruku tu te wini wini, tu te wana wana. So that was, I read what was there, that was good, so I hit the save button, and then that goes into the system. The other thing you can do here is you can review other people's recordings, and that's to ensure...
e hiko e haere ana, e taki haere ana, ka ko manawa ake te anipa.
That's to make sure that the data we're getting is good. And so we have some simple rules here around what constitutes sort of katika or good, and kia kaha, which is readings that could use improvement. So a good recording is audible speech. You can hear what's being said. The speaker reads what is written, and the pronunciation is correct. So in this case here, that was actually correct. I just want to point this out here. You'll see this transcription. Because we have a speech recognition working, we're actually using that to automatically transcribe recordings that we're collecting, and that gives us an indication as to how good that reading is and whether we really need to quality review it or not. And so that helps us more quickly surface recordings that might need to be reviewed or might need to be removed from the corpus. So that's the sort of panel that we have there. So the key here is that with this web app, it was really just a tool to collect data. However, we launched a competition to motivate the community to contribute to this cause. And in doing that, we actually learned that this sort of tool was quite helpful in terms of improving literacy for reading and improving people's te reo Māori. So it was, for me, for example, it really helped improve my reading just by reading a lot of sentences using kōreramāori.com. So when we launched this campaign to get people to contribute to our cause, we managed to collect over 300 hours in the course of 10 days. And one of the reasons why we were really successful at doing that is because we've built a lot of trust in the communities over the years in terms of how we look after data and how we collect data. And so when we approach the community to say, look, we want to build speech recognition and other innovative tools, but we actually need data to do that, we said to the community that we're going to collect this data in a culturally appropriate way. We're only going to use it for the purpose of language revitalization and promotion, and we're going to use it to help create digital innovations for Māori by Māori. And so that was enough for the community to be like, yep, that's a great cause. We're keen to support it. Let's go in and do our readings. So around, the idea of like ownership of data, well, that's the wrong question. Like, we don't own the data that we've collected here in this web app. We are just the guardians of that data. So this is the whole, Western ownership versus Indigenous guardianship. It's like land, right? Traditionally, we never owned land. We looked after land because we knew that if we looked after the land, it would look after us. Likewise, we think we should treat data exactly the same. Our data and our knowledge and our tools, our IP, we should treat that with respect, and we should guard it and protect it and use it for the right causes that are culturally appropriate. And if we do that, then we'll only do better for ourselves. However, if we want te reo Māori and other Indigenous languages to be ubiquitous, they'll have to exist on these platforms. They'll have to exist on the Apple iPhone and Alexa and Cortana and Siri. That's the only way our languages will become more ubiquitous. But that poses an interesting challenge, because if our languages are available on those platforms, who profits from that? So before we get into that, what are the goals of giving access to Indigenous data or tech? And for us, what's really important is that we maintain sovereignty over the data and the tech, and that's really just ensuring that we have the power to decide how the data is used and how the tech is used, because that means we can ensure the data and the tech is used for good for our people and our communities. We also want to create more opportunities for our people, especially high-tech jobs, doing machine learning and speech recognition. Wouldn't that be great if we had more Indigenous people in tech, working on machine learning and things like that? So one way that we can do that is by actually building these technologies ourselves and creating those opportunities for our people. Finally, this is really about promoting language and culture from a Maori worldview. And so we need to ensure that the data that we collect and the technologies that we create help us, again, to further the mission of our organization. So I have this question here. If we give tech companies access to data, could they sell language services back to our people? And this is really important because, the way that Google works, and Google's API, for example, is your Google phone will know the same languages that the Google Cloud API thing knows, right? So if you want your Android phone to speak your Indigenous language, it means your Indigenous language needs to be available on Google's Cloud API services, which means anyone in the world can now access your language as a service. And by accessing that API, Google actually, charges money for that. You have to pay Google to access their cloud APIs. So all of a sudden, you have a non-Indigenous entity selling an Indigenous language as a service. We don't think that's the right approach. And there's a lot of reasons for that. Let's just think about land again, right? All of our land was taken away. Some of us don't have our land yet. Some of us have a sliver of the land we used to have. And when I say have, I mean like the land that we had access to, the land that we used to look after. We no longer have rights to protect those lands because of colonization. So now what we're seeing is big tech are coming after our data, and they even want Indigenous data. So I want to bring up Lionbridge. So Lionbridge has been soliciting Indigenous people to give them their Indigenous voice reading Indigenous sentences. In their emails, they're saying, language revitalization is important. Yes, it is. And they're passionate about helping to save Indigenous languages. Well, that's cool. But they'll pay you $45 USD if you contribute like an hour of your voice. And for someone who might have their native language, who's been marginalized and could use $45, they might think, yeah, hey, why not? But then all of a sudden you're allowing Lionbridge to have access to that data forever, and they can then go and on-sell that to any company. Lionbridge sells globalization as a service. And so that we don't think is the right approach. I want to bring up Duolingo. I believe they genuinely want to help save and revitalize Indigenous languages. But this is a sample of one of their loading screens, and it says, more people are learning Irish on Duolingo than there are native Irish speakers. Now that's a bit patronizing, and it's really rude to the years of Irish people working to revitalize and save their language. And I know they didn't mean any harm with that, but that's what happens when, sort of tech come in and try to save the day for us and lack the real cultural knowledge and context of what we're trying to do. So there's a lot of improvement to be had. I do want to mention a license that we're working on. It's called the Kaitiakitanga license. What it really is it's like open source, but with affirmative action. So in terms of the data and the tools that we've built and collected, so we have Maori speech recognition. Now we feel only Maori-led organizations or initiatives should have access to these tools initially. So we want to make sure that Maori are the first to have access to Maori speech recognition before anybody else, because that's the only way Maori will have an equal opportunity to compete against non-Maori who might want to use Maori speech recognition tools. Interestingly, but not surprisingly, many non-Maori have been approaching us for access to Maori speech recognition. And that just reminds us of the inequality in the tech sector. You know, all the big tech companies in New Zealand are run by non-Maori dudes. And we really want to grow diversity in tech. And so again, affirmative action open source is our Kaitiakitanga license, and we think that's one way to help solve that problem. Another option, and I talked about Google selling our languages as a service, or any big tech selling our languages as a service, is really to adopt that royalties model that, for example, artists get when they make music. So when you stream music on Spotify, every time you play that song by that one artist, a bit of money goes to that artist. So then why can't we do the same with our data? So if profits are generated from any bit of data, then a portion of that profits should go back to the communities from which the data originates. That seems fair. And in fact, if Apple were to agree to those sorts of terms, then we might be in a position to say, yeah, okay, we're happy for Te Reo Māori to be on the Apple platform, so long as any profits gained from that can go back to the community. We'll see. So now, Te Reo Māori ASR, I just wanted to highlight a few things that helped us, some statistics around our speech recognition. So first of all, Te Reo Māori, and in fact all the Pacific languages were oral languages. They were only transcribed recently through colonization, and because the missionaries wanted to share the word of God via the Bible, and so by transcribing our languages, they were able to translate the Bible into our native languages and get us to follow the Bible. So in Te Reo Māori, there are 10 consonants and 5 vowels. So that's only 15 characters compared to 26 or whatever in English and thousands in some Asian languages. So in that sense, it's a bit more simple than other languages. Now for deep speech, and I think for most other speech recognition, generally you need an alphabet, and that's these consonants and these 5 vowels. You need a lot of text, and that helps you to build a language model so that when things are being said, the language model predicts what words you're saying and what phrases you're saying. And then finally, you need utterances, and that helps to teach the acoustics of the language to the model. So for our Te Reo Māori speech recognition, we have about 400 hours of data, about 5 million words, and that together gives us a word error rate of around 10%. It depends. It can be better, and it can be worse depending on the acoustics, the device you're using, what you're saying, and who's saying it. So that's Māori speech recognition. I think the best way to show you that is to just show you some demos. So this is a little demo we have just to demonstrate the speech recognition. It uses a voice activity detection thing. So let's give it a go. E whakarongo ana koe ki te reo. No hea koe. E pēhea ana koe. Yay, it's working. Let's just play this back. E whakarongo ana koe ki te reo. So what you see there is some red bits, and the red is the confidences that the model's giving back in terms of how much it thinks it got what you said correct. And in this case, it actually did transcribe me correctly, which is good, but that just shows you that the model is still not really certain and needs improvement. In this case, no hea koe. Where are you from? That one, yeah, no red, so that was good. E pēhea ana koe. Now, for some reason, it didn't like the pēhea, but again, it transcribed me correctly. So these confidences are something that we're pulling out of deep speech so we can do something else, which is measure pronunciation. So I'll take you to that now. So with these confidences, Well, let me go back. So one thing we learned from our Kōrero Māori campaign is that a lot of people really wanted immediate feedback on how well they were doing in terms of reading and pronouncing Te Reo Māori. So we took that feedback and went about to develop our own pronunciation model. And we're using deep speech to do this. So we're sort of hacking it because it wasn't really designed for pronunciation feedback. It was designed to do speech recognition. But here what you see is a target sentence. And so what we're doing is we're telling deep speech, this is the sentence output that we want. And if I were to then read that sentence, what are the confidences that the model gives back? And can that help me detect whether I'm reading, I'm pronouncing these words properly? He rā anō a pōpō. So that was correct reading of the sentence.
He rā anō a pōpō.
So again, we see a bit of red. I mean, it was correct. It probably could have been better. I'm not a fluent speaker. But let's try now reading with intentional incorrect pronunciation. He rā anō a pōpō. So in that case, I didn't elongate my vowels. Those are the O's with the macrons. And I said ra instead of ra.
He rā anō a pōpō.
So it sort of noticed that I didn't really do that pōpō right. And it did pick up that incorrect R sound. So that's just a demonstration showing how you can use deep speech and these confidences with a bit of tweaking on the back end to do real-time pronunciation. It's something we're still working on, but this is one of the outcomes of building your own speech recognition system, is then you can then say, well, what's next? And in this case, pronunciation is next. So I just want to show this UI that we have here. So I showed you earlier kōreromaori.com where we can review recordings. And so what we're doing here is we're splitting up each of the letters in the sentences and making an interface where someone can actually select which of these sounds might have been incorrectly pronounced. So let's have a listen.
Ka hore ngaku kōrero tūtara ki taku iwi mō te paremata. Ka hore ngaku kōrero tūtara ki taku iwi mō te paremata.
So that there was a sound like a naku or something there, but that was written as a aku. So in that case, I would label that character, that sound there as incorrect. And the point of this is so that we can build sets of data that we can use to validate our pronunciation models. So we want our model to tell us where we're wrong when we are wrong. And if we are correct, it shouldn't tell us that we're wrong. It should tell us we're correct. So this UI here is to help us to label data for that specific instance. And now the final thing I want to show you is kaituhi. This is a automatic, this is a transcription tool that we built, and it uses our automatic speech recognition in the back end. So here's a news item that I uploaded. And so what you do is you upload audio to this web app. It cuts it up into chunks using sort of audio voice activity detection or silence detection. And yeah, and it's just a web-based UI to do transcriptions. So that's the magic button, the auto transcribe button. So I've hit that, and there you go. So now this is the recording being transcribed. When it works pretty fast. We'll have a listen.
Ngā take o te tai tokerau.
Tau katoa kua tahuri mai ki e nei tai pito pito kōrero o te haura. Atu I te reo irirangi Māori o te hikua te ika, ko ngā take o te tai tokerau e haere ake nei.
So e haere ake nei, though that was wrong. It said I taua mea kite, which is strange. So we can just go in there and fix that, e haere ake nei. And so we're bringing those confidences into this UI so the user can more quickly see where the automatic transcription might need to be corrected. So yeah, this is a web app that we built using Te Reo Māori speech recognition, and we are using it now to transcribe all of our archives. And so just gonna quickly show you, this is our Teiku Media organization. We have this Papareo project. You can see there are 94 transcriptions. So we're uploading data, we're automatically transcribing them, and we have people going in and correcting those transcriptions. All of this data gets synced back to kororomari.com, which then makes it back to our training to improve our Te Reo Māori speech recognition. So yeah, there you go, Māori ASR. So thank you very much for this opportunity to have a kōrero with you, and hopefully ahui ho.
Sorry, I was talking without any audio. I thought I had my headphones in. But anyhow, yeah, thank you all for attending the conference this year. Thank you to the volunteers. Thank you to the speakers. Thank you to all of the donors for this year's conference. Couldn't have happened without you. All of these videos will be available on YouTube at 4 p.m. Central Time, so please share all the videos once you get them. Again, I thank everyone, Maro Jigejes, for everything, for all your help, and we will see you all next year for next year's conference. Check out our organization, nativesintech.org. Please donate to our organization and to help us continue the work that we're doing through our open collective. All that information can be found on nativesintech.org. Yeah, thank you all. See you later.